Mr. Morley.
Here.
Chair Morley. Mr. Whitten.
Here. Our first order of business is a approval of minutes from last month's meeting. Minutes were circulated to the board. Do I have a motion to approve from the board?
Make a motion to approve.
Steve Whitten, second. Noel, any comments or discussion on the minutes from last month's meeting? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. We have a new member joining us tonight. Tyler. Welcome, Tyler Brunel. If you'd like to just give us a couple of minutes of your time and introduce yourself and kind of give us your background and interest in the Marine and all that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for letting me serve here. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to doing my part. I grew up in Panama City Beach, moved here in 2011. Currently live in the Landings. Spent about 11 years in the military, most of which was in Ranger Battalion, 1st Ranger Battalion in the Florida National Guard. Went to combat with the Florida National Guard in 2003. Came back, got a degree in intelligence studies. Started working for the State Department as a security contractor. Did about 5.5 years in Baghdad doing that. Came back from that and moved here. Married a wonderful woman and have a 2.5-year-old son that's amazing. That's it. I mean, I own a boat, live on the water, all the things that probably most everybody here has to deal with. So
Excellent. Well, welcome to the board and
thank you very much.
thank you for your service.
Thank you.
My brother was 82nd Airborne, Ranger Tab. So I went Navy, he went Army.
Awesome. So there's a lot of ribbon at your house.
A lot of ribbon. Goes with my family.
And the Army Navy game was great.
It was great. All right, so next on our agenda is going to be item 4. It's our waterway crime and building safety report. Sergeant O'Neill.
How's everybody doing tonight? So for the month of February, the Marine unit responded to 28 calls for service, 3 of those being accidents with no injuries, and I'm happy to say only 1 burglary. So that's great. And it was a kicker motor off the back of one of the boats at Cooley's. Unknown time delay on that, at least a week. The owner didn't want processing done. I sent tech services out to see if they could find video of the incident. We also wrote 62 citations in the month of February, and that's it.
So at the thank you. At last month's meeting, a question was posed and then deferred to this month's regarding the status of the garment thefts that were kind of going on, and if any progress had been made in the Detective Bureau for that. And
So in Miami-Dade, they made some arrests of a group down there. I notified our Detective Bureau. As far as I know, they hadn't linked them to ours, but that was just because they didn't want to talk. They lawyered up. But I'm sure it's probably the same group as like taking some of the ones in this area, but they weren't able to recover any or make any links to it. But since they've been arrested, really haven't had much burglary, so that probably, you know. Also, my guy's been reaching out to a lot of the homes along all the canals, and especially the people that own garments, to, you know, bolt them down the best you can. You know, go by a ring camera that's pointing towards your boat. You know, try to secure them yourself. You know, because we're only 8 Marine unit officers out there, so we can't be everywhere at once. So that would really help, because if they can't get it quick, they're going to leave it. So if they get the word out, hey, don't go to Fort Lauderdale, everybody's got their stuff bolted down, you know, with Loctite or whatever, then hopefully they'll kind of lay off a little bit. So it looks like they have, so that's great. That we just 1 burglary for the whole month, and it wasn't even a garment.
Yeah. That's excellent. Well, thank you to you and your officers for that effort and public outreach. It's best if we can avoid crime rather than respond to it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions from the board for the officer?
Sergeant, you're up to 8. That's a good sign.
Well, me included. So I have 7 guys and myself. 2 are about to be off training, I'm hoping next week. And I have 1 guy who's on his retirement vacation right now, so his replacement will be coming at the end of this month, and he'll begin his training. So hopefully by April air show time, I'll have everybody up and running and have a good solid crew and not people in and out. So
Come a long way.
Yeah.
Cameras working, or are they installed yet, or?
So the mesh cameras are installed. I mean, I can't say where they are, but they have been installed. So haven't anything to pick up. out there, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, they only keep them there for so long, you know, because they won't have so many for the city, so once it does its cycle, then they're gonna have to move them to another part of the city where they need attention. But if these homeowners and captains and stuff can get their own cameras, that's great. We have an easy way with our evidence system where if you can send an email or even send a text, you can send us the video and we can put it in our evidence system and it'll go right to the detective. The detective doesn't come out, our tech services that come out, that the people can access it like on Ring or one of these comparable companies, then my guys can send them a link and you just upload the video right to it and it goes right to the evidence, the detective can see it right away. That's the best way to do it. So I highly recommend anybody who lives on the water, anybody who has a boat on the water, spend $100 for a camera or whatever you want and protect it via Garmin, anything, get that thing bolted down, and I think that will be our best combat for these guys.
Can we convey that to the industry?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's, I'm sitting here right now, my Ring camera just went off on my boat, so it's kind of funny.
Please come in.
It's on in.
Mine
Seats
they
back
know where
here.
you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we convey that to the industry somewhere.
Well, even the same thing as the sergeant said with respect to both come down, we just put two Garmin's in, and they both went down to the point that you'd have to tear the boat apart to get them out.
Yep.
So I think the installers have to get that message out as well to really secure this as well.
We can communicate that maybe through the MASF and
Great idea.
through those factors too. It's always best if we can avoid property crime wherever possible. Okay, any other questions from the board for the sergeant? Any questions from the public for our FLPD representative? No? Okay. Hearing none. Sergeant, as always, thank you very much. Thank you for your service and assistance here. All right, moving on to item 5. It's a dock permit request for 1109 Cordova Road for Andrew and Amy Shook. David, you presenting? All right, David Nutter for the applicant.
Well, you weren't gonna do it.
Bigger print, that's all.
Had surgery too on it. This is just your typical request for private use of public property for a dock, and it's a floating dock. So through there, that's the aerial view, of course, right there on Cordova, where most of these take place. That's the view of the house from the north, that's across the street, and then from the south, that's my little Santa Fe right there. This is the view of the easement on the other side where the seawall is. It's from the north and then the south. And then we have a view going down the seawall cap, more straight along the seawall cap. And then there's a bridge right north of this, and that's the view from the bridge. And of course, the dock will be right in that area. There's the existing conditions. Right now, there's no dock there. We're gonna put in a floating dock. It's 65 feet long, if I can remember correctly. Can't tell if that's the 60 or 65. It's got the 5-foot setbacks. It's 10 foot wide. There's gonna be a little access platform that goes across the seawall cap out to it. There's a ramp from the grass up to the access platform, and then of course another ramp going from the platform down to the floating dock. The boat's gonna sit on the outside of that. The boat's gonna be about 14 or 15 feet wide, so it won't be impeding traffic or anything like that. That's closer up view of it, of course. And you can see this little side section view down there. There is the docking area out there. I did separate areas for the dock and the vessel itself, so you can see. What did I just do wrong?
You ended.
I didn't end. There's more. I know there's more than that. Maybe that was all. This is an easy one.
Oh, that's it.
This is just private use of public property, so.
Can you pull up the Site plan again?
Site plan?
Yeah, I think that's one of the last slides. Scroll down. That, yeah, either number 9 there, 9 or 10, or 9 or 10 be fine.
That one right there? Or do you want the next one that shows the docking area?
Yeah, that one's perfect.
That one?
Yep, perfect, okay. All right. Thank you. Open up to the board first for questions for the applicant's representative. Any questions from the
Yeah.
board? Norbert?
Question, where you're putting it on the roadside, you know, on the road, where I just seen all the ruts and everything else, by any chance is there a drain anywhere there? You know, that drains the road?
I did not look for a drain, I do not know.
Okay.
Steve?
No, I mean, I know what Norbert's alluding to with respect to the people driving on the swale, it just drives us all crazy. Other than that, I think that you've addressed the fact that you're not penetrating the seawall and everything else, so you obviously understand.
No, the one platform's gonna cantilever over it, it's gonna be attached in the grass and then on pilings on the water, so there'll be no attachment to the cap itself.
Nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for bringing that up. Just so the public's aware, the Cordova Road project, when the city of Fort Lauderdale put in the new seawall, it's a city-owned seawall, so it's actually public property. And one of the stipulations for the applicants seeking approval with us and the city commission for putting in docks is that they cannot penetrate or mount anything directly to the seawall. So they can't drill through it, they can't drill into it, they can't attach cleats or anything like that. So typically, this is a floating dock. Typically, the margin docks will have an interior piling and an exterior piling, so there's no bearing on the seawall itself. As Dr. Gassman can attest to in the past, this is primarily a tidal flood control barrier rather than a docking area. So that's a critical thing we have to make sure of, is that there's no penetrations there.
That also includes utilities too.
Yes. Yep. So everything's got to go up and over. So I think your plan here is
It's exceptional.
the only thing I don't see is the landscaping plan, David.
There's one in the packet, I just didn't put it in the.
Okay. Excellent. Jimmy?
That's correct. And if this is a floating dock, and it'll be a fairly large boat that'll be tied up to it?
Like a 30 or 35 footer, 40 at the most.
Okay, so not a real big boat. So I'm just thinking of the attachment in storms and because there are no cleats on the seawall, there's no real dock being
No,
built.
he's probably gonna, during a heavy storm, he's probably have to go more in a marina somewhere else like that.
And I see he's actually put his certificate of documentation for the vessel into his packet. And it's showing it as a 43, I think. So looking at it, my eyes are much better than yours now, so. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant from the board? Any questions for Mr. Nutter from the public on this issue? Hearing none, back to the board.
Make
Norbert?
a motion for approval.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. George, second. Any further questions or comments from the board? All in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate it.
I brought them in for you. No problem.
Stay up there and do that. All right, next item is, excuse me, item 6, a dock waiver request for 87 Isle of Venice. Jenna, please state your name for the record and,
Jenna Robbins.
thank you.
With the developer.
Uh-oh.
Yep. Thank you.
I'll take her to everyone. Thanks.
Genius.
Hey, it's fixed. How is the audio? Is it all right? Picking up?
Working.
Okay, all right. Let us know if we need to do anything different for you. Thank you. All right, Jenna, your show.
Thank you. My name's Jenna Robbins. I'm with the Chappelle Group. I'm here on behalf of the applicant JDSFC Properties LLC for the property at 87 Isle of Venice Drive. located just north of Las Olas Boulevard along the Rio Grande Canal. Here's just an aerial photograph of the property. As I said, it's just north of Las Olas. It's a multifamily development and it has existing perpendicular slips. Here's a view from the north side of the property facing south. It has a concrete marginal dock with 4 wood finger piers currently. And here's a aerial or a picture from the south facing north. And then here's a couple aerials from different directions. This one's facing south, so you can see that it also has perpendicular slips, which is similar to all of the other residential properties along the Rio Grande Canal. And this is the view from facing north. This is the view facing east, and in this one, you can see that there's existing mooring piles all throughout the canal here. And another view facing west. And here's a closer view of the property. You can more clearly see the existing concrete marginal dock, the existing wooden finger piers, and the mooring piles. And there's about 8 slips that utilize these structures. So, as I stated, the property has an existing concrete dock, 4 wood finger piers that are approximately 10 feet long and 2.5 feet wide, and there's about 18 mooring piles there that extend a maximum of 37 feet from the property line. And the applicant is proposing to remove those structures, install a new concrete panel seawall with cap and batter piles, as well as install 4 composite finger piers that are 18 feet long and 3 feet wide, as well as install 18 wood single mooring piles. 9 of these 18 mooring piles extend about 35 feet from the property line, so we're requesting a distance waiver for those mooring piles that extend 10 feet above the allowable 25 feet. And here's a cross-sectional view. The top is showing the existing conditions of the site with the existing wall and existing pier, and the proposed conditions on the bottom showing the new wall in front of the old wall, as well as the new finger pier and 2 rows of mooring piles. And then this is the same exact plan sets except laid over an aerial. So the existing structures are shown here in yellow and orange. The waterway here is about 160 feet wide. And then the proposed structures are shown here in red is the new concrete seawall. The new finger piers are shown in green, and then the 18 mooring piles are shown in purple. And so the most waterward pilings are the ones that we're requesting a waiver for, as they extend 35 feet from the property line, whereas the most landward mooring piles extend 25 feet from the property line. And here's the same proposed layout blown out, so you can see that we're proposing structures that are consistent with other ones that are currently along this waterway. And it's to accommodate 8 perpendicular slips, which is also consistent along this portion of the waterway. And the city code states that structures and vessels can't exceed 30% the width of the waterway. So shown here is in the blue, shaded in the middle, is the navigational channel. That's approximately 40% the width of the waterway. And so the structures shown in green and purple, as well as the proposed vessels, will not extend within the 40% navigational channel. So overall, we're requesting a distance variance waiver for 9 mooring piles that extend 35 feet from the property line, which is 10 feet above the allowable 25. We're requesting this waiver, because the structures and piles will not exceed the 30% of the width of the waterway, so they will not impede navigation. They're also consistent with other structures that have been, installed and permitted along this canal at 35 feet from the property line. And it will help the residents safely moor their vessels during high wind events and severe weather. The applicant received 2 letters of support from 2 neighbors to the south at 81 and 75 Isle of Venice. And then here are a list of existing waivers that have been issued for other properties within the vicinity. And more specifically, similar waivers were also granted for structures to extend 35 feet from the property line within the Rio Grande Canal at 141 Isle of Venice, 91 Isle of Venice, and 10 Hendricks Isle. And then also just from the canal to the west at 95 Hendricks Isle, or no, 9 Hendricks Isle, a waiver was approved at a similar distance of 35 feet from the property line. Thank you.
Okay, Jenna, can you do me a favor? Can you go back to slide 12 first?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So a couple questions, and then I'll turn it to the board. I noticed you mentioned that the new seawall will be in front of the existing seawall, which further encroaches into our
Right.
into our canal. So you're measuring your waiver request from the property line. Where is the property line in relationship to the face of the new seawall?
I believe the property line is landward
Okay.
of the proposed wet base.
All right. And they chose to go in front of it rather than using the existing because existing is not structurally sound, or what's the reasoning there?
Right.
It's not structurally sound?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then number 16, if you don't mind. Okay, great, thank you. So you mentioned that the 30% rule, and actually for structures, the code is 25% for structures, 30% for vessels.
Okay.
So that's just to clarify, some of the members of the public are, talking about this very issue. So the 25% rule then for this waterway for structures, we're 160 foot wide, right? Yeah, so it's 25% or 25 feet, so, and then 30% for the vessels. Looking at your picture right now, it appears that several of the vessels that are currently tied up at that house, at that residence, are violating that standard already.
Right, as do many others.
Yeah, it's a problem in this area, I'm sure. I think one of the concerns is that as we go further and further out with pilings, we'll further violate that rule even more and more and more. So that's a question that I'm sure the board's gonna ask, is how are we gonna, and Tyler, maybe you can speak to this, as to how the applicant is going to restrict vessel length there to comply with the 48-foot rule that exists in the code for 30%.
Right, well, and also, as Jim mentioned, the existing piles are 37, we're pulling back to 35. We're also, it's important to consider that the vessels that are there now are, with the current facility, this will be a new multifamily development with new tenants, new owners, and those owners will be restricted to the 45-foot slip that you see in the table. So with the renovation, I'm sorry?
Louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better? All right, so what I was saying is that the slips with the new facility will be 45 feet. And this is a reduction in the location of the mooring piles that are holding those slips. We're going from 37 feet out back to 35 feet, to answer the question. And as far as the seawall, not just is the seawall in a poor condition, we also have to meet the new seawall codes for the city of Lauderdale, so we're having to raise the cap as well.
Okay. All right, any questions from the board for the applicant? Norbert?
The boats that are there now, is that in a, who owns those boats, and is that one of the areas where rentals are allowed? In other words, there's boats in there right now, and it's only one residence, correct?
The existing facility is also a multifamily, so there are multiple unit owners in the
But, I
unit
mean, the
building
boats-
now that own the boats. Whether or not all those boats are tied to the units, I don't know that answer. As far as the new proposed development and what we're proposing, those slips will be part of the unit owner development.
Deeded to the units or not?
They will be part of the units,
Okay.
and the owners here can answer that question as well. I also wanted to follow up on the letter of support, and the applicant and owner is here and he could probably explain better, but he did have a meet and greet with the adjacent property owners on Hendricks as well as or across the canal at Hendricks, as well as on this street at Isle of Venice, to go over not only the development but the marina on January 15th, and had a lot of the neighbors attend and had some support there as well. So that wasn't reflected in our presentation, but I thought it was important for the board to.
Thank you. Other questions?
I got another one. One of the pump out stations and stuff over there, a lot of those boats and stuff basically don't move. Are they regular service by pump out stations, you know?
We are not proposing a.
Perfect.
Look at that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You don't wanna do that. We are not proposing pump out. So as far as your answer to whether or not the vessels are being, serviced at this point, I do not know that answer. You know, these canals historically, as far as sailboats and people living on the sailboats, we've had that issue in the city for years. They obviously have the right to go to a local facility and get pumped out, but we do not have that service currently proposed.
Other questions? Steve?
So, a couple, just practical questions. This is a condominium you're proposing, so it's a condominium, and there will be a boat slip for each of the condominium units, so it'll be deeded with it. Does that mean, and is the owner of the individual condominium unit restricted from renting the unit, the slip?
Yes. So why don't you come up and introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Sorry I was late. Salvatore, S-A-L-V-T-O-R-E, Cannizzaro, C-A-N-N-I-Z-Z-A-R-O. I live at 41 Isle of Venice in Fort Lauderdale. So, to address some of the questions, I purchased this property as is, and these boats that are in the slips now currently that you see were there when I bought the property. These folks have been there, some for as many as 15 or 20 years, and some for 5 years. And they know they have to leave when the construction begins. It's a little bit of a free-for-all because that other boat that's kind of sideways, they don't have permission for that. I've asked them to remove it, and it's still there. Some people do live on their boats. None of the boat owners occupy the apartments. The apartments were very run down. We temporarily did a quick fix to rent it while we wait for our overall approvals, which the process is about a year long, so might as well put it to use. So now it's fully occupied. Was there another question that
Well,
I used?
you say it's fully occupied, but it's fully occupied as a rental property? right?
Yes, sir. 6 months lease.
You're planning to renovate it and turn it into condominium?
Yeah, this will be completely knocked down and a 8-unit condo building built, which is proposed, and I have a couple of pictures here. And that is a whole different approval process. The docks will also be rebuilt in accordance, to the new standards, and that's what the Chappelle Group has reassigned here. So there'll be 8 slips, 1 per condo owner. And as far as rental goes, you're only allowed to rent within the unit owners. So if you have 2 boats and I have none, and you want to keep your separate boat there, you're allowed to rent it to me, or I'm allowed to rent you that slip. But no outsiders. It's a private community.
I
Correct.
So a fundamental question for Tyler, when you design mooring piles 35 feet out, how far are you anticipating a boat to generally exceed past that?
In this
No, generally, if you go out 35 feet, how far
typically we
past?
try to put piles at the bow of the boat,
Right.
but in this situation, based on this board's historical approvals, we've kept it at 35 on this specific allocation.
Jimmy?
Question, on the base of the seawall, in this particular case, how far out do you think the base will move from where it is?
18 inches.
18 inches? What's the rule, or what is the going rule, as far as for how far out? I know you're allowed to put it outside of the existing.
18 inches qualifies you for a specific type of permit. And then if you go beyond 18 inches, it kicks it into a larger and longer permitting process. The most you can go is 3 feet from the mean high, which is usually the wet base, the existing wet base, or if it's on a consolidated shoreline, then it would be the mean high water line.
Okay.
Hang on one
To
second.
clarify.
I've got a follow-up, and maybe Andrew or Jonathan can help here. Going back to the pump out issue, what's the city rule on how many slips you can have before you have to have fixed pump out and fixed fire suppression? There isn't.
There is a city.
So I know above 5, they consider it a commercial marina, right? Above 5 slips on a single property?
The marina.
Yeah, okay. But there's no set standard for a pump out.
It's not a city
designation. Okay, all right.
Ted, don't you need, Tyler, it's 100 feet or more, don't you have to have fire line?
Dictated, right, by NFPA, so they have their own regulations. So yeah, usually a fire cabinet's every 100 feet.
All right.
I
Tyler?
just want to clarify something. You said that the original pilings are at 37 right now, and you're actually bringing it back 2 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
And I'm guessing those 37s weren't waiver permitted.
Grandfather.
I hate that word, Steve. I hate that word. All right, any other, moving around the table, Elizabeth,
No, I'm good.
Mr. Norvell?
Did we receive a letter?
Louder.
Yes. I'm wondering if we received a letter of against today about 4 o'clock, and I'm trying to find it.
Yes, we've got several opposition, I think there's some folks here to speak also,
Okay.
so we did get an email letter, I believe, of opposition, correct, Andrew?
Correct.
That was submitted to the board, so we can review that.
Okay. I was just making sure we're gonna do that.
Yep. Should we read that, or?
Any other questions?
Stand by one?
I think when you open it to the public,
Okay,
they'll have the
alright,
opportunity to speak.
That'll work. All right, going back to our board, any other questions from the board? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public? And if you do have a question or comment, I ask that you come up here to the podium, identify yourself, and speak clearly and loud enough so we can all hear you. So any comments from the board, from the public? Please, absolutely.
Hi, my name is Eli Neward. And,
What's your name again, please?
Eli Neward.
John, that's not working.
You hear me? Eli Neward. So I've been in Fort Lauderdale since 2000. I used to own a water sports store called Water Plane. I've been a boater all my life. And 2 years ago, I bought the property at 1 Isle of Venice Drive. And as you know, or you've seen, we have catamarans that are wide. And we're already having a very difficult time navigating to get out of the sea. The boats are getting bigger and bigger, and people just don't care. I've been myself on a boat many times where it's like a 1 or 2 foot distance of navigation. So I'm strongly opposite any kind of development to let people go out to the waterways and and make the navigation challenging. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public for comment for or against this issue? Please come up, introduce yourself, and make your comments, sir. Thank you. I'm hearing it's humming. So, if we can project, maybe we'll be able to do it without the microphone, perhaps.
I'm Jim Border. I live shall we say, next door to the property. An observation, all of the docks on the east side of Isle of Venice are at a maximum of 25 feet. I sent into the board a picture looking down. You can see there's this nice, row of pilings. It's consistent. We have vessels already exceeding the maximum that is permitted to be docked all along the Rio Grande with 25-foot pilings. Having reviewed this exhibit, I failed to see an extraordinary circumstance for this property that requires a 10-foot extension for the pilings. I mean, quite frankly, this property is just like my property. My pilings are 25 feet, not a problem. And it's a straight line, the canal's no wider. And, with due respect to the property owner, he's the one that controls the property. He can't control the vessels that are there now. Once he sells the property, he can't control the vessels that will be docked there. And with 35-foot pilings, it encourages 60, 70-foot vessels, which we know further down the canal, the Marine Patrol has to deal with, and code enforcement does not address. And noting, my neighbor at One Isle of Venice, I see his vessels going in and out. And quite frankly, I don't know how they make it because of the number of vessels exceeding the 48-foot maximum. And bottom line, there's no justification for the extension. Nothing extraordinary. The canal's no wider. The property has no unique features. I see no reason to grant the waiver.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other comments from the public, for or against? Going once? Going twice? Okay, back to the board then. Conversation, questions?
Yeah, one comment. There's a boat that I periodically run out of Isle of Venice. It's 38 feet long on the east side. The pilings are midship, and there's no problem with the boat being secured with pilings of midship. It doesn't need pilings further out. The midship is fine, stern's fine. The boat's very good for any weather situation. So in a practical situation, you don't really need two big pilings further out. That's my experience.
Okay. All right. Tyler, if I may, I'll have you back up for a second. Can you go to the slide that has the dock plan that has some dimensions on it? I want to clarify. Keep going. It's a plan. That one. All right. So just so everyone is clear, what's our max width on the biggest dock here? 50? Is that 15.5?
15.5.
So 15.5 is our max. Average is 13.
Yes.
Okay. So our biggest width of the slips is 15.5 then. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Slip. One slip. No one is 14.5.
15.5, 14.5, and the rest are 13.
Rest are 13s. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you. That was the only clarification I wanted to make on that. All right. Back to the board. Any other questions or comments for a motion, Norbert?
Yeah, I said I kind of agree with what Bob was saying over there. I said basically when you get those piles that are out further, that people have come to the board and stuff in here. We've had people swear up and down, this is the biggest boat on here. This encourages for a larger vessel to be moored at that than what's right there. In other words, the gentleman was just going to say they don't have any problem with the 25-foot. The way that the docks and stuff are in there, actually one where if you put the docks in there, the way the piles and stuff are, you can hold them through to the center of the dock. With those pile and stuff, by putting them out further, I would think that you encourage it and stuff. Already they're encroaching. Just the way that it is right now, they're encroaching on that 30% rule. That's all. So if you would put the pilings and stuff out further, you're you're encouraging a larger vessel, in my opinion.
Understood. All right, any other comments from our board?
How much larger could you go with 15-foot pile?
Hmm?
50, 60 foot, maybe 50, 51, 14, 15.
I sent the pictures that I showed in there last time, I had a photo there is 15 feet beyond the pile.
All right, so let's get a rebuttal from the applicant then, either from Tyler or from Salvatore.
Yeah, so first, I just wanted to make the point about the distance of the width of the channel as far. I know the microphone doesn't work very good.
Project.
Trying to
Use your dad voice. Use your dad voice.
No, that's yelling. What I was saying is that at 160 feet, if you take 30% of that width, you're at 48 feet for a channel width that would give you 48 feet in the middle, and then you have 30% on each side. So the largest vessel, if it is a catamaran, I don't know what vessel is the largest vessel on this canal. I can't imagine that it's greater than a 48-foot beam. But the other thing about the ability to moor a vessel on a 25-foot pile and pivot into a slip, I would wholeheartedly disagree. And that you actually need the additional slip on the outside for two reasons. One, yes, you need it for storm events and everything in order for the tide to bow and have a better, safer mooring for the vessel so it doesn't get banged up. But it's also the fact that when you have vessels stacked perpendicular together like this, there's a small room for error. And a lot of the boaters, especially the boaters that we have in our community, are not the most experienced, so they use that pile to pivot to get into the slip. So that's also part of it. It's not just storm events, but it's also to enable the vessel to get in safely into the slip. The other thing is, if you look at aerials for this canal as well as all the other canals on the north side of Las Olas, those piles, for the most part, with the direction of this board starting in the last 2 years, it does in fact make a channel down the canal where you have consistency in waivers, and yes, there are some facilities that do not have waivers, but when the developments are coming in and redoing their docks, this board is making sure that they meet that criteria of 35 feet, which redefines that channel. And that, I think, is important, that you've already had 4 or 5 projects on this canal where we've limited it to 35 feet. So you're already redefining that channel. And that's the reason. But Sal, I think, had something more about also the navigation that he's seeing in the canal as well.
Thank you. The gentleman who has those catamarans, I see you coming through, passing my house as well. I don't know how you do it. It's an extremely wide vessel. How long are your boats, the catamarans? How big are they?
48, 31 feet.
48 feet?
Yeah.
And how wide?
31.
31 foot wide. There should be a restriction on the width of a boat that you're bringing down the canal, as well as the length of a boat. I feel for these captains running those boats.
But I'll tell you something else. I'm gonna have to use this. I'll tell you something else. I'm a boater, been a boater for, well, I'll just say 50 years for now. And I have my boat now behind my condo at 41 Isle of Venice on the east side. I own a slip, came deeded with the house, with the condo, and I docked my boat, and the pilings at 25 feet that you were addressing, sir, earlier, do not properly tie up my boat at all. So when there's high winds coming or storms, I have to take 2 additional bow lines, one port, one starboard, and run them across 2 slips, which fortunately one's empty and one's occupied by jet skis, so I'm able to go over them and secure it to the cleat there and do the same on the port side. If I didn't do that,
my boat would be sitting like this, which is crooked. I went to visit a neighbor this morning across the canal who had very much valid concerns. He has a sailboat. It's 45 feet long. He only has a piling going out so far. Don't know the distance. I'm assuming it's 25 feet. His sailboat cannot sit straight in his slip. I saw it. He acknowledged it. What I'm saying is, because we're adding another pile 10 feet out of the existing 25 foot, is not going to allow larger boats. And the reason is, and the simple reason is, the larger the boat gets, the wider the beam gets. So I have a 48-foot boat with a 15-foot beam. Boats that are 50 feet, 55 feet have wider beams. So you can't get into the slip. It's not because you can't get into the slip. There's 13 feet average, that's a 45-foot boat. And, I've been in boating a lot of years. So it's not going to encourage larger boats. And that's what I have to say, which I know Mr. Border had said that. Sometimes I see how it's maybe not as highly monitored. If there are two 50-foot boats pointing, which there is on our canal, it's a tight squeeze. And it's a tight squeeze for me. And I don't have as wide a beam as the catamaran guys. How they do it, I don't know. But I just wanted to emphasize that I think it would be more of a danger and a hazard not to have these pilings, so that you can properly secure your boat. In addition, I happen to be the developer there. I'm selling the units, and my how do you say, the regulations, not only in the bylaws, but to the people I sell it, is going to be to the specifications in which we got approvals for, and nothing beyond that. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna comply with what's approved tonight. But it's my suggestion, and with good reason, that you keep those pilings there so that we have better protection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question that I have, following what you're saying over there, you just said with your own thing that people are getting larger boats. What I have found out, what is happening in the city of Fort Lauderdale, people are buying a boat and then they get the property to fit the boat. And how they do that, in other words, they wanna actually go to get what you're in here for, to get variance and stuff of it, for the boat. As opposed to saying, I have a boat, I have to buy and I have to get a property that fits my boat. Where I live and stuff over there, I'm limited to probably a 30-foot boat. I can't get it any bigger than that. Why? Because if I got a larger boat and stuff over that, it would not fit in the area, fixed bridges, whatever it may be. But what I'm saying is, it looks like the tendency today is that people actually, if they have a 50-foot boat and they have a 65-foot piece of property, and they lay the boat parallel to the boat, to the shore, it's fine. They got the setback and everything is fine. The minute they turn it out, okay, then it allows them to get a larger boat that's on the other side, because now with the dock and everything else they put on, they're no longer parallel, now they're perpendicular. So they put the perpendicular thing, when they sell the piece of property, the next person that's coming in there that wants to buy that piece of property, there's no limit to how they can get up other than the 30% rule. So they're already encroaching, because what they did, they shopped for a property that would fit the boat rather than the other way around.
Well, I can appreciate that. My personal experience, my wife and I were looking to buy here a number of years ago, and the first two homes we had, one was a home, a townhouse, and one was another condo right on Isle of Venice. It didn't fit my boat, so I didn't buy the condo. This fit my boat, and I bought the condo. It just worked out for me. But in terms of someone I sell the condo unit with a deeded dock, that I have no knowledge of them being able to come for a change, to say, hey, I need my slip made, 3 feet wider, because that to me is not practical at all, because then you're encroaching on the other guy's slip, and that can't really happen, so I can appreciate that.
I have a, Tyler, just don't go anywhere. It's gonna be for you, actually. So I noticed in your proposal, you talk about limiting the length of the vessel to 45 foot in the condo docks. Is there any plan to tie that also to a deed restriction for these slips, to limit them to 45 foot, or is it strictly in the condo
It would
docks
be in the
itself?
association documents.
Just in the association documents, okay. Is the applicant open to the idea of having a deed restriction placed on the vessels also as part of the application?
I can't speak to that on the attorney side, but I think where the weight of the association documents, and that's gonna be part of their contract, so they have to abide by the association documents. You can't really, I'm not sure legally you can deed restrict a
You can.
slip.
You can, actually.
You can, that even if the water is not owned by the applicant?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, if it's a deeded slip, that's why I asked the question. It's
Yeah.
something, because that then allows code enforcement to actually act on a complaint from a neighbor versus a complaint to the condo board, which may go answered or unanswered. So, okay.
Understood.
All right, that was my only question. All right, thank you, sir. All right, anything else from the board? All right, excellent. Jimmy?
Actually, a question I want to ask Sergeant O'Neill, which is, how do you, for when, if there's a complaint on a boat that's too long, how do you measure it? Or do you measure it?
That's from the code enforcement. When I had that in the past, then we have, visual aids that tell me how far I am from the shore. I'll get right on the boat and measure from where I'm at, the canal, see exactly how that is. Then, the other side of the boat to the canal, do the math and see if it's out 30%.
So you use like a laser
Yeah,
measure?
rangefinder. Yeah.
So you're going to the base of the seawall.
Right, so width of the canal, and then you find out the width of the boat, the beam of the boat, and then do the math, and you know where.
But also, you don't know where the property line is, because it could be, as you said, 3 feet further out than what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we go by the property appraiser, if we have to. I mean, normally this is code enforcement kind of thing, and we just kind of help them out with presence, in case someone gets froggy,
So like I noticed that on the application, there's on the east side of that street, there's a whole line of boats that are, looks like to me like 50% taking up the water. Have you been over there to measure any of those?
I haven't lately. I mean, like I said, it's this code enforcement's game. That's because they would find the homeowner for that. We normally just would assist code enforcement. In the past, we would take them on our boats, but they have their own boat now. They can go out themselves, and we would show up on scene if they were getting a homeowner's giving them a problem. Every now and again, when they were unable to go out to measure, we would measure for them, report back to them, but we wouldn't be involved in finding or charging or anything like that.
Yeah, my point in asking the questions is really that the enforcement is really the thing that this board seems, is very concerned with.
100%.
Is that we have, just as with a deed restriction, how do we enforce it? It could be, the law is one thing, enforcement's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, it's code enforcement's game, and since they have their own boat now, they should be it should be easier for them to go do this kind of methods instead of relying on us to ferry them, where I can maybe spare a 1 day a week a boat to take them around to all the properties they have to check.
So I know that when there's a boat in one of the lakes that's moored, that we can't figure out whose it is, we can't tow it away. And I know that we can't just tow boats off of docks. So if there is a violation of code with too long of a boat, or for instance, the boat that's laying behind the one boat sticking out the water, what do you what's the actual mechanism for getting the boat to move?
I mean, it's gonna be the property owner that's gonna get the fine for that, not even the boat owner, the property owner would get the fine for that. The only way that my boat would tow another boat is if someone's life is in danger. Like, that boat is gonna crash into another boat and cause harm to somebody. It's the only way one of our boats are gonna tap into the boat and tow it. But as far as that goes, then the city would just find the property owner, and then it behooved him to get the boat owner to move the boat out of the way. There could be a case, maybe said if it was a total hazard to navigation, maybe, but that's like a call for each individual officer at that moment, depending on what's going on. But we don't make a habit of moving them because once we tie off, we own them. So if anything happens to that, then it's our baby.
Okay, thank you for
Let me ask you something, officer. How many times have you ever had a measure boat? How many times have you been asked for the code that you might be in violation that you personally have done?
A dozen maybe. It's a long time ago though.
One of the things that should be brought up, we had, the only violation that you're basically looking for is the 30% rule, like you have in here.
The setback.
So we have had applicants come by here and they took an oath, whatever they had in here, that they would not have a boat. And the one particular one I remember was 85 feet, which was fine, but they were in a real wide section down in Fort Lauderdale. So after they had that, and after a few years, I went in there to take a look and have to be done my boat. And I said, you know what, this is one that we gave the variance to where the people swore up and down, said, we won't have anything more than an 85 footer. They have a Westbrook in there, a Westport. The Westport's 112, all right? So they are still not anywhere near the 30% rule. So that would go away because if you measured the boat is not in violation of the 30% rule. But they also said, I was never gonna have a boat bigger than 85 feet. And we have that, I don't know how many times that I have heard that in the last couple of years in here. We won't definitely not have a boat. Just within the last couple of months, we had a person say, no, not so, but once they get that dock, or once they get them pile out, all of a sudden that goes away. And I said, within the last couple of months, there's a person that said they can't have anything more than 70 footers. They got 80s in there now. And they're still not in violation of that 30% rule. That's the problem that I see, where they basically can put another vessel in there legally. And you can't, and I'm no reflection on you, because there is no way that you can enforce something since they are not in violation of the 30% rule.
Norbert, I don't want to get too far off tangent here on 87 Isle of Venice. It does have a 30% rule factoring into it. That 30% rule will be 48 feet. Going back to that issue, spoke with the city attorney, assistant city attorney. The only way we can do that enforceable for the sergeant would be to have it tied to a deed restriction if it's less than that 30% rule. So getting back to the 87 Isle of Venice issue, any other comments for anyone from the board itself? Brewster, I know you had your arm up.
Yeah, my only question is, we've heard about association documents and bylaws at all. Is that accompanying an application? Because we don't know what happens next once this leaves our table.
Right.
So this gets approved and property owner sells off to a new developer, and new developer doesn't put any bylaws or put any associating documents into place because they're not governed to. Then all of this is.
All right, so Tyler, can you speak to that perhaps?
Yes, so spoke with the client. We are fine with this approval tonight.
Outside of course, yes.
That voice.
I spoke with the client today, and
Brewster's question.
can you hear me
We
now?
couldn't hear Brewster's question.
Oh, we couldn't hear Bruce's question.
My question was regarding association documents. Since there is nothing in our presence now that supports what will happen next, is that going to be provided? When is that going to be provided, or should that be provided? Because if said property owner now sells off to a new property owner and the bylaws are not written for the new condo owner, or there's no association documents even drafted, then any kind of rules will not be enforceable anymore anyway.
So basically, your question is, do the condo documents convey with in perpetuity
Right.
to future owners of the property itself and future condos?
Is this even approved? Is the condo approved?
Well, no, because the development's still in the process, but.
So it could stay multifamily and he could continue to rent this
Yeah,
out.
let's let him answer the question one at a
Yes,
time.
but, in speaking of the client, we're certainly, acceptable, if it appeases the board, to include a condition in your approval that would ultimately be part of the resolution, that association documents, would include that language that would limit to the size of the vessel to 45 feet.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Brewster?
That answers it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? And since this is been a lengthy conversation, I'm gonna open up one more time to the public, just quickly. So if you have again, come up to the podium, sir. Condition motion. Yep. Yes.
If I may, just a brief comment on condo association documents. The owners of the units,
Your name, please?
yeah, Jim Border, sorry.
Yeah.
The owners of the units can modify them. So if you're looking for something permanent, it's not there.
So your background's law, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have one comment though on this comment.
All right,
The
quick,
owners-
briefly.
The owners of the units cannot modify the bylaws. It has to be a decision by the board members to present the modification.
Which is a collection of owners.
Right.
Okay.
But at the same time, if it's not, it may be suitable for you, but not for the rest.
All right, so closing this item out, let's go back to the board. Anything else? Do I have, Bob?
Yeah, just one question. Would you be amenable to a resolution that approves the dock plan, but not the pilings?
No, because the pilings are the only thing that's requested in front of you tonight for a waiver.
Right, yeah, it's strictly, the waiver is pertinent to just the pilings themselves.
Just a point of clarification, the neighbor that objected adjacent to us has pilings at 35 feet.
Thank you. All right, let's close out for comment then, bring it back to the board for a motion. Do we have a motion presented by the board? For or against?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Robert Chiarelli? Robert Franks, second, and what are you approving as it's presented?
Correct.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote then.
Can you repeat the motions?
So the motion is to approve the request waiver as presented for 35-foot pilings.
Without the condition for rain.
That's the motion we have right now. Is that correct? With no
Yes.
conditions?
Correct.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote on that motion.
Mr. Whitten,
Opposed.
Mr. Flanagan. Mr. McLaughlin,
No.
Mr. Harrison,
No.
Ms. Chiarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Norvell,
No.
Mr. Franks,
No.
Mr. Boyer absent, Mr. Knott,
No.
Ms. George,
No.
and Chair Morley.
No. All right, so that motion fails to carry as presented. Do we have a motion for a conditional motion with the conditions that Tyler spoke of to be included in it, where there's a restriction placed as part of the application for the vessel length?
I'll modify my motion.
Well, it's a new motion. Your motion was defeated, so we need a whole new motion then. So,
Motion to approve that.
motion to approve a conditional motion to include language limiting the size of the vessel in the application to the city, correct?
To a specific,
To a length of?
45 feet.
45 feet. Thank you. So that would give you the 35-foot pilings limited to a 45-foot length.
Correct.
All right, we'll try that motion
With a deed restriction.
with a deed restriction.
No.
No.
The restriction was not approved.
Okay, so no deed restriction, just on the documents themselves. Okay, do I have a second for that motion? Nope. Motion fails to carry a second. Motion is dead then. Any further motion on this item? Okay, hearing none, this item has failed to receive a waiver request. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item. Item 7, dock waiver request for 728 Bryan Place.
it was two to nine.
Miss Jenna, fancy seeing you here. All right, let's get the next presentation up. If you're following along, folks, it's item 7 on our agenda.
Thank you. So these folks, can you let them know they're up next? I mean, so I've seen some people start to leave. So what have they got? 2.5 hours?
Yep, so following this motion, we'll get to our discussion on the New River concerns, and we'll address, that'll be our next item of business after Bryan Place is reviewed.
Thank you.
Go
Hi
ahead.
again. I'm Jenna. Hi again. This is Jenna Robbins with the Chicago Group. I'm presenting another distance waiver request for Mr. Brian Braley at 728 Brian Place in Fort Lauderdale. This property is located along the New River just west of the 4th Avenue Bridge, just before the New River forks off. Here is an aerial view of the property facing west. The current property has a marginal dock with a small dock extension in the center of the property and 2 existing mooring piles. And here's another view of the property from the east. A view from the north. And another one from the south. And so the existing property has a 767 square foot wood dock, a 75-foot long coral rock seawall, and 2 existing mooring piles. The proposed project consists of installing 2 floating docks, one on the west side of the property that's approximately 40 feet by 15 feet wide, and then a second floating dock that is U-shaped and would moor jet skis, as well as install 4 wood mooring piles. One floating dock extends about 41.2 feet from the property line. The other floating dock extends 48.1 feet from the property line. And the 4 wood proposed mooring piles extend 69.5 feet from the property line. So we're requesting waivers for those 6 structures. And here's a cross-sectional view of the property showing the existing seawall along with the wood dock, and then the proposed floating dock that will extend approximately 48 feet from the property line. And then this is the same layout, so overlaid on top of an aerial. So the waterway here is about 310 to 320 feet wide. It's about the largest width of the waterway here between the bridge and where the New River forks off. The existing structures are shown in orange and yellow, and then the proposed floating docks are shown in green. They're to accommodate a 65-foot vessel and a 35-foot vessel. And then the 4 proposed wood mooring piles are also shown in green. That will extend about 69.5 feet from the property line. And these structures and proposed vessels extend no more than, or well less than 30% of the width of the waterway, and are consistent with other structures along this portion of the waterway. And here's another exhibit showing the distances that other structures extend from the property line, as well as the width of the waterway here adjacent to the property. So it ranges from 250 feet wide to about 320 at maximum. And then there's structures that extend 45, 62 feet from the property line, and the neighbor just to the east of the property had a waiver approved at 62 feet. So overall, we're requesting waivers for 6 structures consisting of 2 floating docks at 41 and 48 feet from the property line, and 4 wood mooring piles that extend 69.5 feet from the property line. We're requesting a distance waiver, and these structures will not exceed 25% of the width of the waterway. They also will not impede navigation as it's located along the widest part of this waterway. And they're also necessary to safely moor the residents' vessels. The 2 adjacent neighbors provided setbacks for letters of support. And then there are 4 additional properties within this portion of the canal that also received waivers, and they extend about 38 feet to a maximum of 32 feet from the property line. And thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
Thank you, Jenna. Let's questions from the board first on the application? Steve, any questions? Mr. Vice Chair?
You know what, I first of all, I think the presentation was great, and I thank you. I said, I'm sorry, I think the presentation was great, and I appreciate you doing so. My response, I guess, in general, is that we have a meeting this evening talking about a moratorium on waivers on New River. So my personal position would be this is not the best time to do this, but I respect it. But I think, again, it may not be as well received as you would have liked, and I'm sorry about that.
Right, from the chair position, I would, thank you for that, Steve. I would encourage the board to weigh each item separately and independently,
Right.
so we can work through our business before we get to our discussion. So the timing may not be ideal, but the applicant has moved forward with their request. So I want to hear questions and answers from our board and also from the public on this particular item, so we can give them a fair shake at it. Tyler. Please.
Thank you for that. And we certainly understand the timing. One of the reasons we're actually here tonight. And what we would want to add to the presentation is that we understand the concerns with the New River, we're familiar with the New River, we're familiar with waivers in the New River. And we.
Stop using your mobile.
Sorry, is that better?
Better.
Sorry. I'm just not used to this room having the back wall blown out. So
You're popular tonight, Tyler.
Like, anyway, what I was saying is we're familiar with the river, and we understand the concerns as far as navigation and the timing of our application. And we took that into consideration, and we took it further and met with the industry at whole, and to discuss the issues with the New River and see what would be an adequate distance or width that's needed for the river for the proper navigation of the vessels using that river, not just for the yards in the west side of the town, to the community as a whole. And we'll probably go into that more in the next item. But with that said, the adjacent property was granted a waiver. Mr. Ed Strobel, prior board member of Marine Advisory, and his distance of his waiver was 62.5 feet. We're proposing 69.5 feet tonight, with the understanding that we are certainly amenable to bringing that back to 62.5 feet, and the industry has indicated that they're acceptable to them, with obviously your blessing, because it's up to you. But we wanted to get it on the record, knowing the discussion that was going to be happening after this item. We certainly will bring that back to you. I certainly would request and would like to hear from the board as a whole, as specific to this application and what we can do better, like often I do when I present these. And if it's to the board's pleasure that we, are not acceptable tonight, we're happy to defer, with the understanding that we know that our application does not meet what the industry has requested of us, and we're willing to move that back to 62.5 feet, but the timing of the application and the timing of our meeting with the industry did not coincide. So I have to note it, the city has to notice this application, has to prepare it, and there's a process. So the timing of that process just wasn't amenable to having us change the application. I'm happy to change it tonight if that's at the pleasure of the board. Although Andrew's staring at me like hell no, because I know that he does not want to do that, because we have to renotice it, and I'm fine with that. So that's where I stand on this item. I offer, and I'm happy to answer any questions, with the understanding that we know the timing's not right. We know that most likely this application needs to be revised, but I wanted to put it before you tonight because I wanted to get your input, and I wanted you to know we're working on it.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, I want to address a couple of things before I turn it back to the board for comment. The property immediately to your east with the waiver, I believe that was 2017 that was approved. And I don't believe, with the exception of myself, that was my first year on the board, I don't believe anyone else was on the board at that time, correct, Andrew? I don't think anyone has been.
Norbert's always.
No, he wasn't. He was actually.
21 years, but not that.
He was off then. So, and recently the city commission asked us specifically about Mr. Strobel's waiver, because they come up in another conversation. And the position of the board was, had he applied for that waiver under today's circumstances with today's traffic volume, he would have been denied for it. So, I'm not sure who within the industry you've spoken with, but we're here tonight to actually talk about some of those issues because there's a lot of emotion about this and a lot of thoughts on both sides. So we're trying to get a consensus of what we can actually look at to help you, the residents, and the industry. So we're going to talk about that as our next item. But all right, getting back to this particular item here, 728 Bryan Place. Do we have any other questions from the board itself for the applicant? James,
I have one, and that is that the on Google Earth, this shows that there's a business at this house, and that the business is American Coastal Realty and Yacht Sales. Is that true?
I have no idea about the business operation. The owner is Brian Braley, who is the yacht broker. So yes, that's who owns it. Whether or not he operates a brokerage out of the house, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Tyler. Any other questions from the board for the applicant tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll open up to public comment. Any comments from the public for or against this application for 628 Bryan Place? 728, excuse me. Thank you. 728 Bryan Place. All right, seeing none, I'll come back to the board.
Did you say public?
I'm sorry. Yes, public.
Well, I am Brian Braley. I just want to get
All right, so you're the applicant.
Yes, I'm the
Please come to the podium and
Yeah, let me if I don't use the microphone loud. They're gonna yell back there.
it's a big room tonight.
It's a big room. So just to clarify, I do not run any kind of business at all out of that location. I am in the industry, and I'm actually a little unique because I'm in the marine industry on the New River. I work out in Rossville Yacht Center and have some association with the ownership of that marine. So the waterway is very, very important to me, and navigation on the water is very important to me. In the same regard, I am a homeowner also, so both issues are important to me, and I appreciate them both, but there's absolutely zero commercial activity out of the house.
So, question for you, sir. The stated dock layout you have is for 2 slips plus some jet ski slips.
Correct.
For a 60, help me, John, how big is one vessel you're showing? 65? 2 vessels, 35, 65 and a 35. Do you own both those vessels now? Do you currently own them, or what's your plan for vessels here?
So we have one now. I have a center console for the 40-foot slip, which is over the port. And I have some small toys, and then I keep a Franklin's here. It's a 60-foot Riviera, which will be the second one.
And that's yours personally?
It is.
Okay. So all the vessels that you're proposing will be personally owned?
100%. I'm not insured for anything like that. We have a house or any insurance.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything else for the applicant from the board? Anything from the public? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Bring it back to the board for a motion. Steve?
Motion to oppose.
Motion to oppose the waiver request, okay? Ms. Noel seconds the motion to oppose. So to be clear, the motion is to deny the waiver request as presented, correct?
And Chair, as I presented, we would like to defer if we don't have the approval.
Do you wish to defer now?
Yes, I would like to defer.
All right. Applicant has voluntarily withdrawn the application for tonight, deferring it for a later date.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tyler. All right, moving on then. Do we need a bathroom break or anything? Or are we good to go, folks? All right, we're going to keep on. Let's move on to our item 8, which is a discussion, New River navigational concerns. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like to make a few points, and since we have a fairly large contingent of the public, I want to kind of bring up to speed on the background and where we're at with everything. So this topic's been going around now for a while on our docket to discuss. Recently, there have been some emails that were circulated about this topic that were not from MAB members that are a bit incorrect. Some of the information on this is flat out wrong. And I want to make sure that we're clear and everyone here is clear on what the intent of tonight's conversation is. And that tonight's conversation is a carry-on from several months of conversation we've been having here officially on the agenda. So to clarify, first off, this board, MAB, is not discussing or recommending changes to the city code, section 47-19(3) for docks along the New River. That's not being discussed. Furthermore, we're not looking to reduce the size of the vessels that the code currently allows at residences. We have no problem with the code as it stands today. That's not our intention. We are not looking at changing setback requirements for these docks either. The setbacks, as they stand within the code, are not being discussed or presented for modification in this discussion. So what are we looking at? What we've been talking about and what we've been looking at is primarily hazards and safety concerns along the waterway. Primarily, we're looking at having some independent studies done that were very similar to what was done 10 years ago. During the Bright Line FEC bridge debacle, there was a lot of things that were looked at for vessel traffic and all that. So we're looking at getting some more of those things done because, as we've said, there's been a dramatic increase in uptick in vessel traffic. So we're looking at that. Our goal here is to make sure that any waiver requests address specific extraordinary circumstances by the applicant, and they're aligned with the needs of public safety and public access. And ultimately, that the vessels there are in compliance with city ordinances. And as you saw tonight, with the applicant's representative pulling the application to modify it for the future, I think they're understanding the intent. So any temporary hold on waivers or any suggested moratorium or anything like that that goes up to the city to discuss is temporary in nature and is designed solely to buy some time to get more information, more data, more contact with the public, more contact with industry, and more contact with the environmental studies groups so that we don't make decisions and the city doesn't make decisions that then have to be unwound at a later date because they're more impactful than we perhaps realized. So looking at what we've heard so far in our past discussions and past interactions, MAB has heard from industry. We've heard from landowners along the river and on adjacent tributaries and waterways of the New River. We have heard from MIASF as an industry representative, and I believe Mr. Purcell is here in the room to discuss anything that from their position. We've also heard from kayaks and SUP users. So we've heard from a pretty wide variety of folks that utilize the New River for recreation and for commercial commerce. So we've kind of condensed it down to several areas of concern that we want to specifically address. Number one, everyone seems to have some concerns about the volume of traffic on the New River. Sergeant can certainly attest to this as well. On weekends, during weekdays even, we're seeing a big uptick in vessel traffic. We're seeing a big uptick in vessel speed on the New River as well. We've got more and more vessels that are having problems maintaining their no-wake requirements on the New River. We've actually spoken to the sergeant about having perhaps some special details approved to enforce the no-wake codes on the New River itself, to help the homeowners out and the vessel owners to reduce damage along the New River. So that's something we're looking at and trying to get that, if we can get that approved and get manning for it, we're going to do that. Concerns also about the docks, the pilings, and vessels that are protruding into the river, both with waivers and without waivers. There are a number of docks that have been identified up and down the river by members of this board and members of the public that are actually not in compliance with waivers that were presented, or were actually built without any waiver on record. So that's a problem that we're looking at as well. We're also looking at, with the larger and larger vessels, we're also seeing an increase in draft of these vessels. As the vessels are getting bigger that are moored in these slips, they're also providing more and more shade cover, reducing the amount of benthic seagrass activity we can have, and it's also forcing manatees further from the banks, which is likely to increase the number of manatee strikes that we're seeing in our waterways as well. So that's a concern. The amount of traffic waiting on bridges and the schedule of those bridges, both vehicular and rail, is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And we're seeing collisions occurring and having problems there and all of those issues. So I'm sure if you live, boat, or work in the river, I think we can agree that we've seen that. And that we're all kind of understanding those issues. Our hope is that we can talk about some things here and kind of get through that. You know, some interesting data points that we've pulled as to why the change now and why the focus now as opposed to 6 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Big uptick in vessel ownership, big uptick in vessel accidents. Year over year has been a 26% increase in accidents and a 19% uptick in boating fatalities for Florida. Florida actually leads the country as the #1 boating accident location in the country. Broward County is #6 in the state for boating accidents and boating fatalities. So it's not just about servicing the needs of homeowners or the needs of the industry, it's about public safety as well. As we're seeing more and more boats, bigger and bigger boats, having more and more accidents and incidents, it's becoming a bigger and bigger threat to life, property, and the environment. We're also seeing a big increase in development along the river. I was raised here. My family moved in 1975 to Fort Lauderdale. I've lived on the river and on the waters of Fort Lauderdale my entire life so far. So I'm an avid user of it. I'm a licensed master. I've sailed tankers, cruise ships, and all that, so I can respect the experts in the room's opinions on this. I've actually towed vessels up and down a river, so I'm familiar with what we're facing here, and I can tell you the traffic is absolutely amazing. Coast Guard estimates that over 5,000 vessels now call the New River home. Yeah, that's a big number. And that we see over 85,000 vessels using the New River annually. Our local bridges are seeing over 1,000 openings a month for our vehicular bridges, like Andrews Avenue, even with a 21-foot bascule height. So we're seeing increasing numbers of vessel traffic year over year over year. Also, the city has spent a lot of time and effort on Coontehatchee Park, making it an accessible waterway for non-motorized vessels, SUPs and kayaks. To me, I like having a motor, but that's just because I'm lazy. But the SUP groups and the kayak groups, as part of the Broward Urban Trail, utilize the New River for non-motorized craft as well. So with the waivers, with the larger vessels, with the increase in traffic, we're forcing more and more vessels of great disparity in size and power into close proximity with each other. So that's a concern for us to look at as well. And we talk about commercial traffic, we're not just talking about yachts going up and down a river, we're talking about barge traffic. And barge traffic is something that I don't think can be understated here. There are some interesting things to talk about with barge traffic I want to get into and we'll talk about later. We're looking at sea level changes coming on. We're looking at seawalls having to be changed, new docks, new pilings. Tyler mentioned earlier about how the applicant has to raise the seawall up to comply with new city codes. Think of all the seawalls along our waterways that have to be raised over the next 25, 30 years. It's incredible. We also look at commercial traffic when it comes to barges for other projects, not just construction related. There is a local operator that actually tows a 50-foot wide commercial barge up to the FPL power plant. It's carrying a 500,000-pound machine that cannot cross bridges. The only way it can get up the river to that power plant is via the water. That can only go via barge. Without that piece of machinery, FPL cannot service their transformers and cannot provide power out of that power plant. So that's a vital infrastructure issue there. The CSX Railroad Bridge, a barge also brought that entire span upriver. So there's a lot of commercial traffic concerns. Yes, yachting is also a big sector of that. And I know the MISF talks about this, and they're the Marine Industry Association of South Florida. It's part of their big thing is to make sure the public understands the impact of this. And they throw a lot of statistics out there. And Phil, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Marine Industry is responsible for over 120,000 jobs.
Yeah, regionally 141.
141 in the Tri-County area, 120 some odd right here in Broward County. And what's our current economic impact?
We're just updating the study, so it's just under $10 billion. So it went from $8.9 billion in Broward to just under 10.
Under $10 billion of direct impact to the economy as well. So I think there's a lot of factors here to look at. It's not just a single issue. It's a big issue with a lot of factors that come into this. And our goal here, and part of what our task is by the city, is to make these conversations happen, to have this interaction with the public and industry so that the city can make informed decisions. Recently, there's been some proposed changes that have been pulled on docks and other things because we didn't have enough input from town hall type settings or from private citizens. So we want to encourage that. So for those of you that are here tonight to speak of this or listen to this, first off, let me thank you for your time. I know your time is important. It's already 7:30, so thank you for coming out. I look forward to a spirited discussion. And I do ask a couple things. We've got a lot of things to get through tonight, a lot of comments to make. As you've seen, our order of business is when you have a comment, come up to the podium, state your name for the record. These minutes are kept. So please make sure your name is clear for the record keeper, and then make your comments and try to elucidate your point as succinctly as possible in 2 to 3 minutes. If we get in a conversation, that's great, but we're gonna try to limit them so we don't get too far off on things. And I also ask you, if there's opposing views tonight, please be respectful. You know, we conduct our meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, and we try to be respectful of everyone's opinions, whether we agree with them or not. So I please ask you to do that and treat all of us with respect and kindness as you would appreciate yourselves being treated with respect and kindness. So having said all of that, and everyone in the room is now up to speed, I think, on where we're at, let's open discussion first to the board. Members of the board? Steve?
I think that along Ted's lines, getting back as an example to Tyler's point, is it the best time to present a request for a waiver on New River? Obviously, there's a concern. What we're suggesting is not to cancel, not to change anything. In my own words, is take a deep breath. Look at where we are and look at the potential damage we can do by allowing these waivers to proceed. And the fact that something has occurred before doesn't mean it would be correct today. So again, we're asking for a deep breath. We use the term moratorium, which I looked up in Webster, and the definition is it is simply a way of hitting pause. And that's all we're asking, is to give us some time to reasonably figure out how to make sure the New River stays navigable, and again, that we can enjoy a way of life for family and generations to come. So again, this should not be confrontational because we're hopefully all on the same page. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And to that point, our goal tonight is to have a dialogue. Our goal tonight is to open discussions up to all of you, get some input so that we as a board can come to a consensus as well that represents the overwhelming needs and desires of our community, both industry as well as private owners. So anyone else? Jimmy?
Yeah, Ted, that was a very good talk you gave to start with. Thank you very much. That was very nice. Ted did a great job. And specifically, what I think that we're looking at is the New River. So we're looking at really from Coley Park up to 595, or to where the marinas are, just along New River. So we're not talking about the canals along the sides or anywhere else, really, to be specific. Because if we start looking at the issues that are on the water in Fort Lauderdale, there's many. And if we start going to the commission to ask them for, let's fix everything, we got a whole bunch of stuff wrong, that's gonna be hard, but if we can remain more laser focused on, let's just make sure that the New River remains navigable, and then we'll go from there as far as on the next thing. And next thing is being, from liveaboards, not being allowed, to where do you load a piling onto a barge that you can't in the city of Fort Lauderdale unless you're gonna do it, in the middle of the night and break the law, doing it, risk being arrested for helping someone fix their seawall. You can't do it. But so there's a whole bunch of stuff, it's like that. But the main thrust now, and really it came up because of a lot of the waivers that we'd received recently, and it's kind of happening all at once, where it's like jump in and let's push out into the river. And we had just a couple of specific situations with barges going up the river. There was a barge that was working at Bradford Marine that was there doing some construction on the roof, and when they went to leave, one of the waivers that we'd granted, or actually it wasn't even a waiver, it was a legal thing. They put the piling out in the New River, just in between Davie Boulevard Bridge and Lauderdale Marine Center, and the barge couldn't get through. So the barge had made it up the river but couldn't go back down the river. Had to wait for the pilings to be pulled out in order to get the barge back through. The pilings were pulled out, and then actually the report now is that the pilings are put back further out into the river when they put them back in. So that's just one thing. The FPL barge is another issue. So there's, in the seawall thing that Ted's talking about is true. That all the seawalls mine has to be replaced. They at least have to be capped and raised. There's a lot of marine construction that's going to be happening, in the next 10 years, from now. But it's going to be really expensive if you have to pull out pilings in order to get the barge down a canal or down the river and get it to the location where it's going to be done. So we really don't want to, make the price so crazy. And if the boats start sticking out too much into the river, yes, the towboats can figure a way out, you know, to get the giant boat up there. If they have to, you know, put some sheets and bumpers on the other boats as they go, they could do that. The cost of then bringing that boat up the river will be astronomical. So while it can be done, it won't be economic, you know, to bring the boat up. Right now, it's extremely expensive to bring a boat up the river. You know, having either tugboats that are helping or captains, you know, that are doing it. It's not cheap. People have choices of where they go, of where, you know, when you're having your yacht fixed, you know, you're not going to go to the place where it's the most expensive place in the world to get your boat into and out of. And that's what we're, you know, aiming to become if we keep going down the road that we're going, which is encroaching in the river too much. So I would say that, you know, at least for now, you know, I believe that we, you know, our communication, our ask to the commission is to keep it kind of laser focused, and specifically on the New River and on the in waivers, you know, they're granting. So it's not, and so we're talking about a moratorium on waivers. Right now, one thing is that the little Florida, the little peninsula that's right in the middle of the wiggles, you know, of New River, there, if they went without waivers and maxed out on both sides of where that is, it could effectively stop boats from, you know, half the boats that are going up the river from being able to go up the river. And that would not take anything. That would not take a waiver. That would just be legal and already to code to do that, which says to me that it means that the code is not correct, you know, of the way that it is written now. So the you know, with that, one thing is that we're also, the Marine Industry Association is looking at what the Coast Guard has done for making it a commercial waterway as they did in Miami. One of the things that FIND, Florida Inland Navigation District, and the Coast Guard do for channels is, rather than, as we're talking, how many feet from, you know, what percent of the width of the canal can you take up? And so that's how close you can get to it, or how far out you can go with your dock. The way that they look at it is, what's the width of, what's the channel? Designate the size of the channel, and then how close you can get to the channel is what it is. So in other words, along the channel's not the same width. It's not like 95 going up, you know, up the thing. There's skinny places and there's wide places, you know, for it. But the channel needs to be a certain width. And so there may be much less bank, you know, on some sides in some areas, and much more bank in other areas. So it's just a reverse way of looking at it. Rather than from the sides in, it's from the center, you know, out, how far to go. So it's just that there's other ideas, you know, and that's what one of the things that can be looked at if we have a moratorium and we have a plan of how to readdress looking at the river, as well as enforcement. You know, we have a lot of code in the city of Fort Lauderdale, marine-wise, that's not being enforced. And it's because it's very difficult, you know, to do, and it's very expensive, you know, to do as well. So to make whatever our code is and whatever we wind up with something that is enforceable, something that's fair, you know, to everyone, of the way that it can be enforced. Which is why I was asking the questions, you know, earlier of the sergeant. You know, how do you do it? When do you do it? How does it get done? You know, for it. So it's something that, especially with dock rentals, and also what's the spirit of the law? You know, what are we actually trying to accomplish? You know, for this, it's like, well, it's law because or it's the code because it is. What's the logic behind it? You know, what is that? And so it's really trying to go back to, well, we can't go back to a blank slate. You know, we can go back and, you know, relook at the whole thing. You know, of like, why is it the way it is? Why is the New River downtown the way it is? What about the dock rental? You know, I mean, the dockage cost that we're charging. You know, are we encouraging nice boats? Are we encouraging bad boats as a place to store your boat? What's the logic, you know, behind it? It's something that we can't, you know, as a board, you know, we have the sunshine law. So all of our discussion really remains here, you know, at this board, in these meetings. What we're asking, what I'm asking, you know, is for the board to be guided by the Marine Industry Association, because they can actually talk to everyone, get everyone's opinion without having a meeting, meeting after meeting. Bring it to us and then have a public meeting discussing, what it is. And to be fair, with, and everyone's voice to be fair. But it's difficult for us to, as a board, to sit here and come up with a whole big plan on, well, this is the way we're gonna do it, and we're gonna sit here for a whole weekend, and do it. We're not gonna do that. So that's basically what I've got, and we'll come back to that.
All right, so before I call the next speaker here, I want to kind of go back to a point about the New River that Jimmy made here. Unlike the Intercoastal Waterway is a marked buoyed navigational channel. The Intercoastal itself is much wider than the channel. The channel is restricted to a narrower part of it. The New River currently is not that way. The New River is, as he said, it's wet face to wet face is basically the navigable area. One of the things that the Coast Guard is looking at, and that is up in discussions as well, is can we define a channel for the New River? Can there be a defined area that is actually set for navigation, and then areas that are outside of that for navigation? To me, this is an idea that has a lot of merit, because I think it supports both the homeowners and the folks that make their living getting docks and waivers approved, because it sort of defines an area that they can work within. And it gives the marine industry and the other users of the river a guaranteed access corridor, if you will, much like the Intercoastal is. And when we see waiver requests coming for homes that are on the Intercoastal, we cannot approve anything that's going to intrude within the Intercoastal Waterway or the safety zones leading up to it. Certain distances have to be maintained. That rule doesn't exist on the New River. The New River is treated right now as if it was a canal behind, one of our homes, the 30% rule. So there's some things that have to be looked at in the grand scheme of things, but the Coast Guard's efforts for the New River are separate from our efforts. It's simply that we're making aware of what our efforts are from a city standpoint, trying to listen to our residents and our users so that the Coast Guard's efforts, we're aware of them. We have some input into what we're doing and what our ideas are, but at the same time, the Coast Guard is federal. We're not even state, we're local. So we're way down a pecking order here for things, but it's one of the things we're looking at. So going back to the board. We have some pictures and some video to kind of people that aren't familiar with the river, so I like to do that before we open up to any more comments. So
Which do you want us to do?
The new folder's all the pictures.
All right.
But we also have the new videos, so.
Let's do some pictures. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words sometimes.
He's done right there.
That's a
Palmer Johnson.
how big is that, Jimmy?
214.
214? 214, okay. And Barry, you shot some of these, or you have some of these?
There she is going around Little Florida.
All right, so that's a Little Florida with her making the path. And there's go back one, sorry. And that vessel ahead of it is actually waiting, it looks like?
It is.
Okay.
There's no docking.
All right.
My barge.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
We're overachieving here.
You're overachieving, Jonathan.
Now we'll go back to that.
All right.
Okay.
So here's,
That's my barge.
so how wide's that barge, Norbert?
The barge is 30 feet wide, and it's, that one is 120 feet long. And it's being pushed by a 46-foot tow.
And where is that on the river?
That's where the Wiggles.
That's in the Wiggles.
Where that is. And,
Okay, so, all right. What are we looking at? Pretty boat.
This boat over here was, actually, they had in there, and it has a little history of that boat. It was used in the movie, I think Thunderbolts or something over there in the Bahamas and stuff. These are some of the people where that boat would not be out further than the furthest piling out, stuff over there.
Okay.
That one doesn't, and the river is quite wide there, so there wasn't any problem. But that was supposed to be, that, I said, it was limited to that piling.
Got it, okay. All right. Jonathan?
There's,
This is
that
by the
would be
icon.
coming up to the tunnel.
Speak loudly. I don't think people behind to hear you.
Yeah, make sure we're
Yeah,
projecting that way, guys.
Turn your head then.
Yeah, that's right above the tunnel.
Right, yeah.
Now,
Right above the tunnel.
what a lot of people don't realize is the boat that's going outbound, that one that you can see right in the center, is fine. The one that is giving way is the one that's over there on the far left. He's already up close to the Stranahan house, right there, where, that boat and stuff and that tugboat is laying over on the side until this boat outgoing goes in, then the other one will come. But they have to lay over in that section. That's right by where the icon is.
Ted, there's another boat to the side, which is at the city's docking area for
Yeah, you can see
fueling.
just the
Yeah,
end of
pump out, see, so you actually have 3 yachts there.
it, the pump out section, I think.
Yeah.
Which really just brings up the point that we only have 2 or 3 areas along the river where it's able to cross, where you're able to hold, on boats. So when the train is going by, this is where the tows stop, this is where the big yachts stop, and so this is where they'll pile up, of boats. So it's not that we can make the entire river one narrow corridor going. There needs to be passing areas, just as there are on roads.
Next. This is a unique picture. There's 4 boats being towed at the same time, which is almost, the towboat operator told me they don't recall having had. But there's 4 of them that you can see, they're all being towed at the same time, and they are approximately just past the riverside.
Speak up, Barry.
So that's,
Four
That-
boats being
that-
towed at the same time on the river, and there's not usually that occurrence.
No, they don't.
That closest one on the front is a 108-foot Choi Lee.
Jungle Queen.
Yeah, that's coming in front of the River Walk extension. Frequently.
Yep.
It's a holding area too that's identified.
Might be added right there that the people that have that Riverwalk extension have applied to put dockage outside of that walkway. So I don't know if they got it, but just to let you know that you imagine a 15, 16-foot wide boat docked there along with what you're doing in there.
Yeah, you can see what's there. John.
Yeah.
This over there is my barge to the right over here and standing by, waiting for the other towboat to pass by.
And about where on the river?
That's up there close to Westport.
Okay, so past 95 then, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Same picture.
Yeah, the drone picture.
And then there's some short drone videos I think we've got also. Hopefully.
Well, Ted, while he's focusing on that, yesterday, 2 days ago.
Oh, hang on.
Okay, this is one of the drone pictures.
Outside boys.
Drone picture.
When was this, Mary?
Earlier this.
This week, right?
No,
This was last month.
Yeah,
Last month, okay. So it looks like Cape Ann towing an outbound, and then a water taxi, recreational behind them. Okay. Inbound. Thank you.
Just passing the Musette down there.
Gotcha. I see her.
Going towards the 3rd Street Bridge,
3rd Avenue.
3rd Avenue, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh, there we go. Inbound.
Yep.
And we can look all the way up the river and see what they gotta go through.
Yeah.
Just a point of reference for I don't know who all is here, but Phil, what would you say that boat when it's going up the river is gonna spend at the boatyard on average?
Hey, if they just go up there and do the bottom and stuff like that, and in and out with the stabilizers and stuff, it exceeds. But a boat like that's gonna go up there and spend some time at LMC or at Bradford's or one of the other yards or Rossioli. And, a paint job on a boat that size is $1 million today. And it takes, probably 120 days to do. And when you're there, you're gonna do interiors, navigation.
Yeah, and those are all jobs that are, in the marine industry, and those are people that live here, that make their living, on that boat. Well, you might think, well, it's the billionaire that owns the boat. It's a whole bunch of us, that are working on that boat and making our living, you know,
Jimmy,
from
And that
doing
boat's scheduled in probably, 6 months ahead to
Yeah.
this time frame. It's like staying in a hotel room.
So looking there, you can see the two vehicular bridges are opening. The FEC rail corridor bridge is down, and with a 4-foot vertical height clearance, not much can get under there. Fish. I went under it once when it was down. I don't recommend it.
Canoe.
You know, in
Uh,
the Coast Guard
Little
report.
21 Scarab. It's the same shot, just going through the next bridge.
Same video.
Different.
You can see where the has to do, take a wiggle, stuff over there, so it isn't like what you were saying, it's not like pulling up a canal.
Right.
Well, and this one you can
Problem.
also,
Right now, you would have a problem with the barges, because the barges don't even have a keel, they slide, stuff over there, so that's the problem with taking them. Right now, you have to make the turn before you even get there.
That's the area with the outflow drains
well, that's the
also.
outflow drain,
Right
but
there
that's
to the-
Heisinger Park, and so that's an area where when the boats are coming the other way, they would actually run right into Heisinger Park, which was why there were the sawtooth docks that were there to keep boats from physically being able to dock on that dock. Because it would be extremely dangerous to be coming through that bridge, going opposite this direction, and having boats docked on the right side of the screen, on that dock, getting closer to it, on that dock.
Ted, I started to say there was an incident, or something happened 2 days ago when we were shooting. Some of the pictures, I don't think you put it on. Usually when the barge, or when the yacht's being towed up, they don't have to adhere to the bridge openings on the quarter or half hour, Yesterday, yesterday there was a 90-foot Lazara and another 80-foot boat that was in front of Cape Ann's tow. So they had to stop at all the bridges where if they were the first boat, they would open on demand, not on the hour. That created a backlog up there.
So that's 3rd Avenue, that's 7th Avenue.
It's Espionage, that's right, over there, the,
Performing Arts Center.
yeah, Performing Arts is on the
So
side.
that's actually coming around into the area we just heard on for the waiver. Okay.
Yeah, another holding area.
Yep. All right, thank you. So some pictures and video are sometimes worth 1,000 words. It certainly highlights the issue of moving the big yachts up and down the new rivers, for sure, so, okay.
To further one brief thing that
Speak up.
it's almost 10 years ago when the Coast Guard retired Commander Gallard came to us and he took a tour and he outlined some of the things that were mainly being directed towards the railroad bridge. But he never saw the number of vessels is what he referred to. So some of the comments in the report, if anybody wants to see it, it's available. When you think about being over in the islands or someplace away and you're coming 1 or 2 degrees on a compass heading can put you in Jacksonville, can put you in Port St. Lucie and Rybovich, Palm Beach, where you don't have to be towed in. You can go in on your own. Maybe you have some, yard tugs that are pushing you around or somewhere. But with the captains making decisions and the cost of tows anymore, it presents a peril to our industry here in Broward County.
Well, I think, looking at that,
Dania Beach too.
obviously, we're here to discuss public as well as commercial access to the waterway. One of the points the Coast Guard made to me was that the New River is considered a hurricane refuge, and it's one of the few insurance-approved hurricane refuges on our coast. Unlike Palm Beach, to where they don't have the amount of inland ability to get other than the St. Lucie waterway, of course. So we're kind of unique in that. So that's a safety aspect also that I think the New River speaks to as well from what the Coast Guard felt. So, all right, anybody else on any other comments to talk about? We've talked about boat traffic, all that kind of good stuff. Some environmental concerns. If there's nothing else from the board, I want to open up to the public. Start hearing some of their comments. So with the board's permission. Okay. Anyone from the public want to come up and speak to this issue? Nice tie. Please introduce yourself for the record and
Good evening, my name is Jim Dunn. I own a 30-foot boat. I live at 1212 Mango Isle. My family and I participated in the Christmas parade on the Dunn Deal. Again, my name is Jim Dunn. Someday I hope to own a house that's on the river, and for as long as I've imagined, since I was in high school, coming down from Michigan more than 20 years ago to go on the Jungle Queen, I thought the rule was 30, 30, 30. I thought that once you had your foothold, once you were a property owner, you had a chance to have a boat that had a beam that was 30% of the width of the river. Now, I feel for the industry. I feel for the men and women that work. But when you have $1 million bottom job coming through, and we saw these big yachts, we saw these big barges, that they could contribute. They could pay to a control system. They could turn on their AIS. They could have to radio to somebody. Between these hours, it's only inbound. Between these hours, it's only outbound. Just one possible solution. But when this board is trying to make a decision that pits the individual property rights, these individual owner property rights, against these gigantic mega yachts, and again, I do feel for the individual. I feel for the propeller repair people, the bottom job people that work and make their living, but you're infringing on and you're encroaching upon a historical approach that you've taken with this 30% rule that pits the individual property owner against the larger Marine Industry Association. I just ask you to take heed, use caution when you use that, and consider that there are other solutions like a control system. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. So just address a couple of your points. As I mentioned earlier, we're not looking at making a change to the rule right now for setbacks. Our moratorium that has been discussed by the board would only consist of moratorium on waiver requests. A waiver request is an extraordinary request that's beyond the code allowance. The current code allows a 25% for structure and 30% for vessels. So that's to hopefully assuage some fears there for you, most certainly. Like you, I came to Florida with aspirations of having a bigger boat. Where I lived in the river, I couldn't have a bigger boat, so I moved. Got a bigger boat, did it for 5 years, and said, okay, that's enough of that. So I'm back down to a smaller boat. Good stuff. But thank you. Any other comments from the public, please? Phil?
If you don't mind.
Please come up. For those of you who don't know him, please introduce yourself.
By all means.
And as I mentioned earlier, try to keep our comments succinct.
I don't have like a half hour or something. Hi, how's everybody? Can't hear me, right?
Can't see you,
Can't see me, can't hear me. Can you hear me back there? No. I don't want patients yelling at me.
Louder.
Can you, is it not working?
You don't need it.
Just talk loud. Okay, I don't need it. Thanks, Chair, thanks for your time. Board members, thanks for serving. I appreciate it. You guys know, we just initiated a new study, so it's a $9.8 billion industry. The last thing we'll ever do is against the homeowners in any way, shape, or form, because if you look at a lot of the waterfront properties along that river, who owns them? People in our industry, just like Mr. Bryan back there from One Water that invested in Roscioli. So that would be the last thing we'd want to do, because we're called the yachting capital of the world. So we need to find out ways, to actually allow boats, because technically if you don't live at your address, if the boat doesn't live at your address, you're not allowed to have it behind your house. We need to find ways to mitigate those things too. Not Airbnb them, but just where you get a permit a year maybe. Maybe it's a $500 fee, but it becomes legal then to be able to work within the parameters that a board could set up. When it comes to the industry, we, by the way, Phil Purcell, Marine Industry Association of South Florida. I'm going to cheat for 1 second, if you don't mind. But if you look at it, there's just a couple things. So someone made a comment that starts at Cooley Landing and go west, and it was you, Jimmy. It actually needs to start closer to Riverside Hotel for the commercial aspect, because that's where the city docks are. That's where you get some of the layups right there in front of Stranahan House. The next layup is right in front of Theater Performing Arts. And then the next layup's actually right in front of Brian's property that had the waiver that he was looking for that they pulled tonight. It's literally right there, and it's narrow. So when you think of the industry, a manufacturer that used to be here called Broward Marine used to build boats. Big boat in the 80s was 90 feet, maybe 100 feet, but it was a 20-foot beam. What you see going up that river with Barry videotape, now you're dealing with 30 to 35-foot beams. And as you hear, when someone says, well, you get 50 feet in the water, you get a third of that, nothing has to be actually taken away, but we need to be mindful that there's catamarans that have been built that can actually be wider at 60 feet than a normal 60-foot boat. And for someone on a third and a third and a third lot, it's the same thing. You have to have the length to be able to accommodate a boat of that beam. And there are different properties in this area, but they're not on the New River for the most part until you get a little bit near Davie Boulevard Bridge, just west of it. That's about the only spot where you can put 100-foot boats along that river going west. And again, most people are thoughtful there. But what's happening is people are building in front of their seawalls. They're not demoing what was there. They're coming out 4 feet. They issued a new dock, and then they put a piling out there because they want to protect their boat because they're getting whacked on the New River. That's part of being on the New River. It's like going to the mall. You're going to get a door ding if you go to the mall or Home Depot. It's part of the risk. You may get a door ding on the river. That gets into enforcement issues too. They can't be everywhere. They got a big job to do, law enforcement also. But the business of seawalls, it's a $900 million business just in Broward County that's coming up. Just coming up here. So people are going to have to raise them and stuff. And then when you think of the investments that have taken place on this river, and if I miss your name, if you have a business here and I didn't, but you got Bradford sitting here tonight, Lauderdale Marine sitting here, New River sitting here, Port 32 and One Water. If you take those companies, most of them have changed hands over the last 7 or 8 years to the owners that are now. Pardon me?
Don't forget Rolly.
I'm sorry, Rolly's here. See, that's why I said I didn't want to forget something. But I knew I would, and I knew the people in the back would remind me. But that said, you're talking about $700 million worth of business, and you're talking about people that have 200 employees, but maybe 1,200 indirect employees that walk through their gates every day. So while no one is ever going to pit the industry or the boat show against the community, and it's not being pitted here tonight with the conversation, it's merely a thoughtful conversation to acknowledge that when you have a 100+ foot boat with a 24-foot beam going down that river, and you have another boat with a 24-foot beam, that's 48 feet. You don't move them next to each other. You need a 20-foot clearance in there because of insurance reasons. The tugs would go out of business if they were doing that. So we just need to be thoughtful that what we all invested in here was an industry and a community that loves boats. But we also have to find solutions because a lot of these rules were made when the boats were 20-foot beams and a big boat was 100 feet. And people have made huge investments, just like real estate property. It's the same thing. Let's figure out ways to find solutions behind homes eventually, but let's focus on the New River, between the New River and all the way west, so that when everyone starts tearing up their seawalls behind the house you want to buy on the New River, you have a barge that can get to your property. Because we all know that live off Cordova Road, how the service trucks for every industry is there as they build homes and stuff. So we just need to be thoughtful, communicate, don't knee-jerk, and don't pass on information or rile up people maybe on the real estate sector of the world to get them upset that someone's going to do something to harm their potential purchase, because that's not an accurate statement. What everyone's trying to do is come up with a thoughtful solution that works for the community, works for the homeowner, and doesn't harm the industry. That's really all it is.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that insight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Others from the public,
Back here.
please come up here. I hear a voice coming from the back. Wow, you look so much different than a voice.
I don't know how to take that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board, for your volunteer hours. My name is Bob Swindell. I'm with the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. We're the economic development organization for Broward County. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, lived in Citrus Isles for 25 years. Obviously a huge fan of personal property rights, but I also want to protect an industry that's so important to this community. Our focus is on high wage jobs, and our largest retention industry is obviously marine industries and this beautiful yachting industry we have here and the people that it brings to our community. You know, you've already heard from the people who know this best, like Mr. Harrison and others. I would just say your issue tonight is to maybe take a pause for a little while, because we make decisions one-on-one and the cumulative effect might have something different than was intended. And just, I would encourage you to take a little pause, look at how we're, going through these waivers and going above and beyond what the code allows. When I bought my house on Tangelo, I knew what what I could do on my dock and what my limitations were when I bought the house. I took that into consideration when I bought it. So I would just say the pause, I think, is a great idea. I'm on the river all the time. I walk along the Riverwalk. I see the traffic, and I think it's good just to look at what we're doing for waivers and ultimately a good policy for your board. So thank you for considering the moratorium.
Thank you, sir. Next. Again, please come up, introduce yourself, and state your position.
All right, good evening. Can you hear me back there?
Yeah.
All right. Very different to be on this side of things because for quite a while I was staff. I promise I'll be brief and that's uncharacteristic.
Uncharacteristic.
Of me. Anyway, back in 1989, I started my career on the New River, where I am today at Port 32. That was a long time ago. And since 1989, my career has been fed off this river. It's quite a resource. It's fed me, but and as you can tell, it's done well.
You've done well. Yes, me too.
Okay. It's paid mortgage payments, car payments, okay, and boat payments. All that I ask is that whenever something comes up on that river, please have the consideration, all that you can, for me and how many people, Phil?
How many people?
Employees.
Yeah, it's just under 100,000.
Just under 100,000. That's a lot of people, and I'm just one of them. So just take us in consideration. Thanks.
Thank you.
May I have your name, please?
Matt Donkey.
Oh, sorry, Matt Donkey, Port 32, 1915 Southwest 21st Avenue.
Last name.
D-O-M-P-K.
D-O-M-K-E.
Yes.
There's the voice.
Oh, yes, I do have a voice, yeah. I'm known to speak up. Anyway, my name is Julie Berry. I was born at Broward General Hospital. If you know Broward General, then you've been around as long as I have, so. And I grew up in the area around Broward General Hospital, around the river. My dad had a boat. He had an office in the Maxwell Arcade, which is where the downtowner is. We had a boat on the river. There were boatyards on the river. The river has a history, and a lot of people have invested in the river along the way. So when people have purchased homes, they purchased homes knowing that they have what they have in the way of a dock. So you have whatever the code is, but to go beyond that code right now, it is something we really need to take a serious look at, because the boats are getting bigger. All of the boats are getting bigger. The yachts are getting bigger. The small boats are getting bigger. Matt can attest to that, because Port 32 has got a dry stack marina, and the smaller boats are all the dry stack marinas around the state are being re-racked because your 25 footers aren't out there as much anymore. People have demand for 30 and 35 footers. So if you go down at the river and you sit at one of the restaurants and you watch when the bridge goes down and the yachts come, and then all of a sudden you get a 35 footer, a 30 footer, everybody's starting to put their thrusters on. They're trying to maintain, they're trying to not crash into the rocks, and they're just trying to get by. And when you saw those videos, you saw boats going behind other boats. Any additional encroachment on that river is dangerous. Now, in talking about the yachts, I will tell you, I've been working in the marine business for a long time. I serve on the Marine Industries Association board. The people that are out there, if you were to go out and go through the boatyards and talk to the people who live from those boatyards, their businesses, their families, and everything they do are all centered around those boatyards for years and years and years and years and years. And if we do anything to affect the yachting industry, it will affect those jobs and those families. It will affect all the other businesses, because those yachts, we did a study, Megan Lagasse and I sat down one day and we were talking about the yachts, and we have to be, is that me?
No.
Oh, it's like, okay, you're done. Oh, send her out of here. Megan Lagasse from Pier 66 and I sat down one day, and what we were trying to do is come up with what the economic impact of one yacht is. And it's difficult because a lot of them don't really like to talk about everything that they spend. But she got one of them to write down everything that they spend. They go to the small businesses, they buy clothes, they go to the grocery stores, they eat at the restaurants. They rent cars, they stay at the hotels. There's all kinds of things that they do that affect Broward County. It's not just the big yacht coming in here. Everybody looks at the big yachts as, oh, the big yachts, they can handle it. It's not the big yacht, it's the economic impact, all the businesses and everybody that they affect. And any impact on that river that impairs navigation will affect the jobs, affect the economic impact, and it's going to affect the property values too, because if those yachts go away, our property values will go down. Those yachts increase our property values. So there's a whole lot more I could say. You're welcome to give me a call, because I'll chew your ear off for about a half an hour. But it's really, really, really important to our industry. Thank you.
So I want to throw a number out there that I discovered in my research on all this. All of us here remember COVID quite clearly, I think. One of the impacts of the COVID pandemic on our community, interestingly enough, was a 59% increase year over year in the ownership of recreational boats. 1 year, 59% increase. There's now over 1 million boat recreational vessels in the state of Florida and over 50,000 just in the city of Fort Lauderdale alone. So when we look at, again, why we're talking about this, why we're looking at it, yes, the yachts are getting bigger. Yes, there's more of them. There's more recreational boats, and they're getting bigger. So we're seeing an overwhelming surge in boat ownership, which is great. If you have a boat, if you don't, I suggest you do. It's a great way to spend time with your family. I have several, so it's fantastic. My son's got a 14-foot boat, so it's a great way to be on the water. But a 59% increase speaks to why we're seeing the changes that we're seeing now in the safety of our waterways. So back to the public. Sir, first, a black shirt, come on up. And again, make sure.
Bradford Marine.
Okay. Your name again?
Justin Hewer. And I am one of those people that she was talking about that lives off of working at the yard. One of the 100,000 people that work at the yard. We don't have anything against the property owners. Most of these property owners with these yachts are our customers. And we love our customers very much. We know that's one of the biggest selling points of South Florida. You can have a yacht, you can also do all your work here. People come from around the world to work in our yard, to bring their boats for us to work on in their yards. The people that do this work are small business owners. There's relatively very small amount of multi-state corporations that have anything to do with the work that we do. Everything is mom and pop shops, small businesses, small business owners. Any impact to that financial or to the industry directly hits voters in this area in their pocketbook. And I understand that the value of a property goes up very high when you can say you can put a 200-foot yacht net behind it versus a 20-foot yacht. The issue being, our big problem is the traffic, as was been pointed out many times. And from what I understand, there's a Coast Guard study underway to look at this. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say, put a moratorium until this Coast Guard study is done. Coast Guard is in charge of doing all the research for navigable waterways. Right now, this is a recreational waterway. It's turning into a navigable waterway. We have commercial traffic. We have regular people owning boats traffic. We have commercial traffic for yachts. We have tugs and barges going up. This is a legit commercial waterway. This is something maybe the Coast Guard should look into. We should take a pause and let them do their work, as opposed to putting 67-foot pilings, pilings 67 feet off of the wall. So then when we find out from the Coast Guard, well, you can't get a 120-foot boat up this river anymore because everyone has 67-foot pilings. It's just not fair. We need to be able to do the study so we can make an educated guess at how to run this river. And, yes, things like radios and AISs do help with navigation, which is why our boats use them going up and down the river. And yes, maybe a vessel traffic service would be a way to fix this problem. They have them on the Mississippi River, they have them up in the inland waterways, they have them in the St. Johns, they have them on the west coast of the Snake River, they have them in Puget Sound. Maybe that's a solution. But like we said earlier, this is a local council that we're talking to. The people that are best suited for this is a federal government, maybe our state DOT to bring it in. I think it's our responsibility to let them do their job and not make it more complicated by applying for more and more waivers. Because it's pretty hard to hit the target you're looking for when every single time the river's changing and the target's changing. And on another note, property value is very important, especially for the people on the river. I get that. That's a huge investment. And you don't want to see that property value go down. But the taxes and the voters that are associated with those properties versus the taxes and the voters that you get from the marine industry cannot be close to equal. We have a huge industry that we need to take into account when the city makes a decision on what to do. Is it more important to employ 100,000 people, get the property value from those local people that work in the industry, get the sales tax from the work that's being done in these, versus helping out, 200 people that might live on the New River that have property big enough to be able to put a 200-foot yacht perpendicular out into the river? And as we spoke before, these layup areas are key to this, for this transit back and forth. Just because you're at the wide part doesn't mean you get to take up as much room, so it equals the narrow part. This is not, like was said earlier, 95 where it's going to be a straight shot traffic. We need these layup areas. There are professionals that do this and maintain this and plan these things. It's at the federal government level, it's at the state government level. We can help. I'm sure the marine industry would love to tell them this is the biggest yacht I can bring up to this point. Don't plan for anything bigger than that because it just can't happen. We're happy to do that. But we can't be having this conversation or trying to find a solution as people are in a race to put the longest dock they possibly can out. So then afterwards it can retrofit the yacht they wanted for when they bought the place. I know where I live, 200 Northeast 7th Avenue. I'm sorry.
It's okay, you don't have to.
I can't park a semi truck in my parking spot because that'll impinge into the road. How is that different from someone building a boat and a dock to impinge their boat out into the navigable waterway? It's unfair to the people driving on the road. How is it not unfair for the boats going up and down the river? Same similar situation. That's all I have, and thank you very much.
Thank you. So, a couple of points I want to make about the New River here, kind of following the gentleman's comments. Everyone here is familiar with Port Everglades, right? You live in Fort Lauderdale, we know what Port Everglades is. Would you be surprised to know that Port Everglades didn't exist before 1928? It was Lake Mabel, shallow inland lake that was inaccessible to the Atlantic. 1928, it actually opened to commercial traffic. Prior to that, going back over 100 years, where did commercial vessels hail in Fort Lauderdale? Along the New River. Stranahan House was actually a trading post. In front of Bahia Mar along the beach was actually old groins there that were actually the inlet into the New River historically. That was then closed off by a hurricane, which is one of the things that actually kind of created the need for a deeper water port with bigger breakwater, bigger entrance and all that, which led to the creation of Port Everglades. So when we look at the New River, there's homes along the river, there's commercial industry along the river, but there's over 100 years of history as the New River being a commercial waterway that's recognized as such as well. So one of my goals as the chair of this board in our discussions tonight is to make sure that we have representation from both sides, the commercial and the residential homeowners, and that whatever resolutions we come up with, whatever suggestions we come up with, address the concerns of both, because this is a unique body of water. You've got homes and you've got commercial traffic on it both. So it's a unique situation. More from the public. You'll close this out? You're buying drinks then. All right. Introduce yourself.
I'm Jim Steele from Steel Towing.
This works.
This works. I'd like to address some of the inaccuracies. The New River is a slow speed minimum wake zone. It's not a no wake zone, almost anywhere. Secondly, I think you guys are overlooking the downtown railroad bridge. New River's basically an artery, and it's getting clogged. A bunch of traffic. Well, that's because 40, 50 boats are sitting there waiting for the bridge. You talk about these layup zones. I don't lay up in those zones anymore because the bridge only opens for 10 minutes. By the time I get through 2 bridges, it goes back down. I'm going to sit there for another 45, 50 minutes. So I bully my way through all the traffic, or else I'll be there forever, or run the other ground because it's taking so long. So the New River will be all essentially in 10 years. If it continues the way it's going, you guys won't have a ward going. That's the reality of it. You know, there's plenty of people spending millions and hundreds of millions of dollars at shipyards. Well, it's not going to be necessary, really, unless you guys start figuring something out to do with the downtown railroad bridge. You know, right now the Coast Guard says it only has to be open for 10 minutes of every hour for about 19 hours a day. The rest of the time it doesn't have to be even open. You know, but that's new day. You're talking about increased traffic. Well, yeah, there's a lot of increased traffic. But that's why all these people are flying through, you know. Downtown Rail Bridge is going down. You see people on plane every day in the New River. If my tongue would get on plane, I'd do it too. But it doesn't. So, you know, it's like the docks and stuff like that are set in moratoriums. I mean, I'll never probably do it out there. Just throwing it out there. It is what it is. But, you know, there's set of pilings that you're talking, you had indicated. I don't think they pulled the pilings because we had to move the yacht for the barge to get out. They might have pulled the pilings at a different point in time, but yeah, they're definitely too far out. I mean, if you drive up the waterway, don't know much, you figure that out, you know, compared to everything else. So, stuff like that needs to be enforced. It's clearly not being enforced. I don't know how that gets enforced, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jim. So speaking of the railroad bridge, just so everyone's aware, the city of Fort Lauderdale is looking at alternatives, both an increase in the bascule height or potentially putting a tunnel in for the passenger traffic on there for a Brightline and the Coastal Link and other things. So that issue is being looked at. It's not the center point of our conversation tonight because those efforts are already underway in a parallel effort, specifically to that bridge. And the Coast Guard is aware of the amount of time it's being closed and the violations of 33 CFR on that. So there's a lot of discussion going on right now at the railroad. So hopefully there's some resolution coming on that. But Ms. McGowan, you've been patiently waiting. Thank you very much.
It's not, I'm used to these long meetings, it's great.
I'm not.
Good evening, everybody. Kitty McGowan, President of U.S. Super Yacht Association, former member of the Marine Advisory Board, former employee of the Marine Industries Association of South Florida, and a resident of Fort Lauderdale since 1967. I would like to, first of all, commend Chairman Morley for your opening comments and setting the pace for this whole conversation. And growing up in this city, I mean, I grew up on Guava Isle. I grew up on the water when I learned to water ski at Marina Bay. So I skied on New River. I used to stand on my dad's shoulders and going past the Jungle Queen. And I mean, so it was a different city. I mean, and things change. I understand that. But I've also been in Fort Lauderdale when you got hired, Andrew, to the city of Fort Lauderdale. And things change. And I've been here since we stole the business fair and square from Miami. I also run the Miami Marine Council from the Miami River. And so, this is an economic impact that is unequivocally the number one driver of this city and this county and our community. But it's not just the jobs, it's a lifestyle. And it's not just boaters, it's homeowners and boners together. And so we shouldn't be at odds about each other, because if we can't get up the waterway, the homeowners can't get boats up to their waterway, and their property value is going to drop because they can't legally put on their property values that you have an unobstructed waterway to the ocean. So, I mean, we should be all working together. And I understand the city's been talking about bridge, tunnel, bascule, this 10 years. I mean, as a former candidate for the commission in District 4, 10 years ago, I was part of a study that was involving a lot of people. We're still talking about it. We've been taking this industry, the jobs, the culture, the part of this city. The Broward, the Performing Arts Center was Chinook Marine. My family used to pull our boat out there. And so this city is rooted in boating and community and family. And if we lose this is the opportunity. And we are. I mean, 70%, this is bigger than Fort Lauderdale. 70% of the yachts that enter the United States come in through Port Everglades. Understand that we are the start of the whole country. But as our previous speaker said, Stewart, Fort Pierce, Palm Beach, Jacksonville, the Carolinas, and Georgia are nipping at our heels. You know why? Because this is a huge economic driver. It drives jobs, it drives family, it drives stability. And we have to protect that. And I firmly, firmly, firmly urge everybody here to keep that in mind. I mean, unfortunately, our commission has not ever taken a pause on looking at development in that same way. And I hope that we can look together and work synergistically with the city to find a pathway to making it all work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty. Please. Again, state your name for the record.
How you doing? My name is Ryan Wyward. I have 100 feet or so on the river south of Davie Boulevard. And so I just wanted to clarify, because the chair said there were no city code changes being pursued, but one of the other members seemed to indicate that he thought that would be a good idea, the 30%. And I actually was looking at the minutes from the last meeting where Chair Morley was quoted as agreeing that while the 30% rule may be sufficient for the city's canals, circumstances are different on the New River, and the same rule may contribute to problems there.
Yep.
So I'm just asking, and I would agree that the waivers are sort of just saying, hey guys, let's stop making it worse.
Right.
But changing the 30% code is actually expanding the sort of, it's diminishing the value of the homeowners and expanding sort of the I guess commercial value to the marine industry. And so I'm just asking, are you guys pursuing just the moratorium, or are you also pursuing city code?
So to clarify that comment, since you've addressed it, the 30% rule, as it pertains to the New River, if we put the comment back in context of that previous meeting, that discussion was around the United States Coast Guard creating what they call a regulated navigational area. A regulated navigational area is a federally mandated, federally controlled, federally regulated waterway, not local, federal. They've done that on the Miami River. The Miami River is the nearest example that we have in Broward County to a similar waterway to our New River on the Fort Lauderdale. So in that context, that conversation was about, with an RNA, there are areas of the New River where that might become a problem, particularly when we're looking at perpendicular vessels. So what we're discussing is not changing the code.
Okay.
What we're discussing is a temporary hold on waivers to allow industry, homeowners, lawyers, and regulators to come together in a consensus of what that area should look like. And I think, as someone else mentioned, to give the Coast Guard time to complete studies and complete their review, because ultimately it's their responsibility for freedom and safety of navigation along the river. It's our place here in Fort Lauderdale to implement and control it, but it's theirs to actually dictate. So that was the context of that conversation. There are areas, I think, Jimmy, you mentioned Little Florida. Little Florida is a particular area on the New River to where if someone put a vessel there right now legally, it could have a dramatic impact not only on the commercial sector, but also recreational boats. The ability of the average homeowner to get a vessel out would be affected there and would create probably more problems for Sergeant O'Neill to respond to along the river. So there may be several areas in the river that have to be looked at as part of this U.S. Coast Guard study, but overwhelmingly, we're not looking at that. We're looking at a moratorium simply on waiver requests, which are those exceeding the 30% rule or exceeding the 25% rule for structures.
Okay.
Does that clarify for you?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
just, I actually, and like I said, I agree, the moratorium on waivers, you're just saying, hey, we're not gonna bend the rules for right now, we're just gonna stick to the 30%. And I'm fine with that, with my 100 feet, I got a straight shot.
How big's your boat?
I don't have one yet.
Oh, wait a second. There's gonna be a broker in the room.
I have 3 kids that are under 5, so it's not worth it right now.
You need a bow rider.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if the board would maybe consider adopting a resolution that a city code change would not be pursued.
We can't adopt resolutions, we can merely recommend to the city commission on those issues. So we're still in it, that's what we're gathering information on right now, is kind of what the consensus would look like.
Okay, and then one more comment. Essentially, I did speak to a captain friend of mine who said that Little Florida is indeed sort of the bottleneck, the litmus test, if you will, for what size boat can go up the river. So ultimately, and I guess, I don't know if the city would consider just buying Little Florida and making it a park or something. But I think that, I think that you should be very limited in the way that you're sort of discriminating in the wiggles. In my straight shot, just leave it alone. because my captain buddy told me nobody cares about your space. So if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna pursue something with that 30%, just really surgically do that.
Well, and that's the idea behind the RNA, is that the Coast Guard would look at the river in its entirety, and then also geographically certain zones of the river where perhaps the channel's going to be a little wider or a little narrower, and there's restrictions in certain areas simply for that safety issue. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. The river is unique. We've got to have some unique solutions, if we will, which is the goal of tonight also, to hear some ideas. You know, the board represents you guys. We represent private citizens, industry, marine users, but we are not the end-all be-all of knowledge. I like to think that we're pretty knowledgeable. We've all got a lot of experience here. Norbert certainly has more experience than most guys in Broward County for running barges up and down a river. He's old. He's been doing it for a long time. He's got a lot of experience on that. From a regulation standpoint, that's my specialty. That's my background at a federal level also, so I bring that to the table. But all of you have input on this decision. You all have input on what this discussion really shapes and where it goes. We want to hear from everyone so we can make a consensus to address specific areas of concern, and then some areas that, hey, you know what, it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, one last point. I hear a lot from industry, which I work too. I'm in industry, not this one, but I certainly don't want. I don't want the industry to have any additional challenges, but as it sits, they're already running their businesses, and in fact, the reason that this is becoming such an issue is because their businesses are doing so well, and they're like, hey, we just want to keep getting bigger. But it's at some point, it's like, hey, if you can't fit your boat at the river, don't bring it. Maybe, and that's all I got.
Well, the definition of compromise is when both parties are happy and both parties are not happy, right? It's kind of like a divorce.
Yeah.
You give a little, you get a little. That's kind of what we're looking for too. Everyone's got to give a little to get a little.
An expectation that you have a certain part of that river.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, anyway, thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Public? Hearing no more comments from the public. Tyler, I believe you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. First off, just want to start with, if I made my living doing waivers, I'd be in trouble. And I've been trying to get rid of waivers with the mayor for years. And the reason is, it's like you saw this evening, it pits neighbors versus neighbors. And in this case, it's pitting the industry versus neighbors as well. And I don't want to see that like anybody else. And I think the one thing that I would add to the discussion tonight is that this discussion actually happened years ago. In 1998, there was a channel that was delineated in the New River. An easement was given by DEP to the city of Fort Lauderdale. It's still in place. It was given by fines back when they were trying to get the city and the county to play nice, which didn't work, and to dredge the entire river so that we could get bigger boats.
Right.
And that easement, if you look at it, and it's still in place, has legal and sketch and everything. It's 100 feet wide. It has meets and bounds. It's already surveyed. It gives you a delineation of that channel, and it's 100 feet wide. So I would hate to waste the time and energy that was done back in those years by the previous fine commissioner, before I was a fine commissioner, before Frank was a fine commissioner, that was established. And I think you have kind of the legwork done for you on that end. I would caution any discussion about federalizing the New River. I know that's the discussion. Given our experience with the Intercoastal Waterway, when you give the federal government something, they just keep creeping. So we've gone on intercoastal to having a 30-foot setback to now having a 62.5 to now closing in on 100 feet. So it's been getting harder and harder. My intent, Phil had some comments directed, I think, to me, and then I think it's important that all parties are involved. I think it's important that the residents, the marine industry, and everybody have input, whoever's affected. I don't know if there was been any discussion about involving homeowners associations that are on the river. I think that's a good idea. I think there's a public forum there, and I think you'll get good feedback on that. I think the industry as a whole is obviously important to this community. I'm a Broward General baby, like Julie Berry. I grew up here, learned how to drive a boat before I drove a car. And it's important, and I respect that, and think, it is the most important industry in our community. But at the same time, there's people that live here, and they need to be addressed as well.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm saying. And I think it's important. I know we're not talking about codes, but enforcement has been brought up all night. And enforcement starts with codes. If you have a good code, you can enforce it. And we've had this discussion, Phil and I have discussed it, we've all discussed it many times with the mayor as to what that code should look like as far as 30%, 25% and all that. This board went through all that years ago when people wanted to have a boat lift off a 10-foot dock and it triggered, because back then it was 20 feet and we moved it to 20, we moved it to 25 to be able to have people to have a boat lift off their dock. So I think you're at that situation where, what's an equitable amount of channel. I think that needs to be decided either through the Coast Guard, marine industry, the boat yards, whatever. That's where it starts. I think the channel is where it starts. When I was talking with Phil, we talked about the city of Pompano. I do a lot of the codes for the cities. The city of Pompano, they start with the channel and you work back in. Right. It's 40% or 45 feet the width, whatever's small, greater. And then you work in from there. Whereas our code at the city of Fort Lauderdale is working
the other direction.
So there's ways to do that, and I'm welcome to assist in any way I can with the board, the industry, whoever, and talking you through that, my experiences through the different cities. But it all starts with the users, like you said. That's all I have.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, so kind of going back and highlighting on some things there, and Tyler, thank you. Your experience and involvement, both at Find, privately, and with your own firm now, is important to us. You've got a unique perspective that a lot of us don't have, and you've got some history that a lot of folks don't have. So thank you for taking the time to speak to that as well. So appreciate that. When we look at the Coast Guard, when we look at Find, when we look at DEP, we look at the city of Fort Lauderdale, we look at Broward County. There's all kinds of folks from a regulatory standpoint looking at this. Our role and our goal tonight is not to come up with a solution. That solution is way bigger than we are, way bigger than we can come up with in one public forum meeting. Our goal tonight is to hear from people and get some ideas and get some perspective that might be unique or different from what our perspective is, whether it be a homeowner like Mr. Dunn, whether it's Mr. Purcell. We've got a lot of things to look at and think about before we present it to the city. We've asked for the Coast Guard, we've asked for city leadership to get involved in this conversation. That will be happening in the future as well. I think there's some general consensus on what we have to look at and areas we have to look at, specifically on the New River. The intercoastal is a whole nother situation, and I agree there's some real distinctions that we have to make. So what we're looking for is a cautious, well thought out, well organized plan forward. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So I only have one more meeting as the chair of this committee before I have to step out because my 6-year term is up. So April's my last meeting. This discussion, I'm sure, will continue far beyond my time on the board. It started long before my time, so it's going to keep on going, I'm sure. But I encourage everyone in the public and industry and the board to keep up on this, to focus on this and think about this, because like Tyler said, like Mr. Dunn said, like others have said, access to the waterway is one of the reasons why we're in Fort Lauderdale. It's why we have homes in a river. It's why we have boats. Now, I was 3 days old when I was brought home to a boat, and I lived on that boat for most of my life until I became an adult. So I'm right there with everybody. I get it. It's near and dear to my heart as well. So I want to thank everyone for their time tonight and their comments. Understand that we will continue this effort. We will keep hearing from you guys, keep hearing from the public. I encourage you to please, if you want, leave your email addresses for us or contact Andrew Cuba with your email addresses so we can communicate with you guys directly and keep you all informed of future meetings, future conversations, and the like. The city is looking at the codes across the board. We're not tasked with that right now. We may be tasked with that in the future, but right now we're not. But our goal right now is to get the information flowing to those that are tasked with that so they can make a well-thought-out, cogent argument for change. Safety and access are the mantra for us moving forward. So, if nothing else on this subject, board, back to the board for comment, or do we have a motion? Do we not have a motion, Ms. George?
So my question is I think there's been a lot of great insights brought to us today from everybody in the room, and a lot of what we've already talked about the last 3-4 meetings that we've had. We have lots of notes, we have lots of things, ideas, so what's next? I mean, what are we thinking of doing next? Are we going to, at our next meeting, start talking about that? I don't think we all wanna stay another 2 or 3 hours to do that tonight, so.
So from my perspective, our next meeting in April, we've got a lot to digest tonight. We've got a lot of perspectives and a lot of notes that came out of tonight's meeting. I've got a bunch of data, and the furious typing here next to me is evidence of how much comments we've had from the public. I would like the board to get the minutes and digest the minutes from tonight's meetings, come up with your final thoughts and recommendations, so that in the April meeting, we can come together and make an initial recommendation to the city on this subject. So to answer your question, Ms. George, I'd like to have an action item for the April meeting after we've had a chance to review tonight's conversations and minutes. Is that agreeable to everybody, so we can actually have that?
I would further say that our only real tool is a letter to the commission.
Correct.
Communication to the commission. So really it's crafting what our ask is.
Right.
And that's, what I had spoken to earlier, which is the moratorium on waivers for the New River. But I think that we need to have some language to reinforce why, that we're asking that. And so I think that if we would communicate with Andrew, any ideas of letters, or that communication, if any of us just write, what that would be, we could discuss that at the next meeting. And further, I believe that the mayor will be coming to our next meeting.
He has indicated that he is scheduled to be at our next meeting, yes.
Yeah, so for the audience, whatever, that, it's really great that you're here tonight, but it would be really great if you would come at the next meeting as well. We should have the mayor here, and so we'll be issuing a communication to the commission to be asking them for a moratorium. At the next meeting, the mayor will be here, so that would be a great time. All of what was said tonight really should be told to him, as well, to go along with that. So I'd ask you all to, hopefully a lot of you can come back, as well to the next meeting.
April 6th.
I think so.
Yeah. Yep, I've got it.
April 6th.
But we don't really have.
April 6th is our next.
And the other thing I can do is I can send the draft minutes to the board when I receive them next week, which is earlier than you normally would get them, to help you with your thought process.
As much as I would like to get a letter out and kind of get some movement on this tonight, I think it's too early. It's premature. I think the board needs to digest the comments. The public has spent a lot of time and effort to be here tonight and voice their concerns and voice their opinions. We have an obligation to them to listen to their comments and actually come up with a plan that echoes the sentiments that were shared tonight. Tyler, again, I'll be reaching out to you in the future, and even in the April meeting. If you're not in the docket for April, please come anyway.
I don't have any waivers left.
Well, you might be bringing another one back for us. I don't know, but please do come, because your input's invaluable to that. And these meetings are open to the public at all times. So I ask you guys, if you are interested in this subject, please be part of this. And if you are interested in serving on this board in the future, please see Mr. Cuba. So we will have some vacancies coming up as we cycle in and cycle out. And we're always looking for members of the public, members of the industry to join us and share their perspectives, so we have a well-rounded representation of our city. So thank you for that. With that, I'll close this item and move on to our next item, which is item 9, old and new business. Sergeant O'Neill, thank you very much for being here tonight. Appreciate your service as always.
Thank you.
I have one question for the city, which has come up a couple times now. There's been a concern about loading and unloading barges for debris and garbage and other things like construction debris and all of that. There really isn't an area in the city of Fort Lauderdale for that. So my question is, where does the city offload all the waterborne trash that's collected from the floating skimmers, if you will?
They go to a boat ramp.
Well, that's true. They use a crane from a boat ramp,
Yeah.
but it's a very small truck crane operation.
Right. It's a small operation.
There's no shale, there's no pollution.
No pile and everything else.
Right. Okay. No riprap, no nothing. Yeah. It's a problem that, it keeps coming up in comment from the commercial industry, is where do we take our garbage, where do we take our debris? You know, we build docks, we take docks off, we build seawalls, take seawalls out. How do we transition that material from one place to another safely, and how do we dispose of it via landside safely? So that's something we'll be taking up in the future, and I would encourage this board to look at those solutions and come up with some ideas as well. You know, it's just something that it's a sticking point for the industry to service the needs of our homeowners. And if you live on the water, $900 million worth of seawalls being worked on over the next 30 years, that's gonna be a lot of debris, guys. We gotta look at that and figure out a solution out to help the industry on that too. Otherwise, the cost to the homeowner just escalates tremendously.
Yes, it does.
If they have to, freight stuff off. It just, there's,
Unbelievable amount,
Yeah.
because not only that, you have to be smaller barges and everything else and stuff on it. And
Less
you have to
efficient.
make several trips and stuff to
Yeah.
other areas, or sneak it and stuff and then get fines
So-
and everything else on it.
that's something that new business wise, I think in the future, I would encourage us to look at and kind of find some solutions, or at least, if not solutions, address the problem at a city level, make sure they're aware of it and they look at solutions.
Frank and Jimmy's propeller advises them just to dump it in the middle of the canal. That's good.
I believe that's what happened off of Las Olas Marina.
Well, yeah, and that's been one of the issues when they're doing all the dredging, the stuff that they've been taking out of there.
Yeah, it's
been
amazing.
scary, and they've broken the dredger at least 3 times in the last couple months because of the things that they found.
So any other old or new business from the board? Barry?
Oh, yes. Our old friend, illegal docking.
Okay.
Last month, we said we were gonna look into and get some answers.
So we've had a couple of incidences where we've had pictures taken of vessels
Yeah.
operating illegal charters off of public docks and the like. The position of the FLPD Marine Unit is they cannot create an enforcement action unless money is changing hands at that time. Really, that handcuffs the Marine Patrol from having a solution to that very problem. How do we solve the problem of illegal charters if the police can only act if money is exchanged at the time of boarding? That's an issue. So I don't know how to solve that problem, Barry.
Most of the time, the captain is not a legal captain, that's
That's
thing
the other
they can
issue.
go
So
after.
when we look at the idea of unlicensed captains, that becomes a federal issue with the United States Coast Guard. As you're probably aware, the minimum license required for a vessel is a 6-passenger, so it's an uninspected passenger vessel license. That's a 6-pack license colloquially. And then from there, you go to a 100-ton master for jungle queens and the like. But those are federal level licenses. There are no state licenses, they're all federal. Speaking to the Coast Guard, I've spoken to Admiral Kirsten about this, who's our District 7 commander. They've got some ideas for enforcement. Their problem, quite simply, is manpower. It's the same issue we hear with Sergeant O'Neill, it's manpower. It's, the big shiny thing gets the attention. Big shiny thing, unfortunately, is bigger than that.
That's a very good point.
So we've got to find some ways to help.
Ted, the codes don't require or make reference to my paying or exchanging hands. They make reference to the fact that a grant, for example, on the floating docks, prohibited commercial use.
Yes.
Whether the guy's doing it as a nice guy, but he's got a sign on the side, call me for charter, call me for this. The method of payment is not what the code refers to.
No.
It refers to
The operation.
that's going on.
Yep.
And the liability that the city is
Taking on.
exposed to.
So we asked that question as well.
Yeah.
And the response was, by the time we get there, they're gone.
Well, then how are we gonna enforce the guy whose 57-foot boat is 20 feet beyond the pilot and he was out that day when the guy.
Oh, it's no problem. The police go by with a laser, they're gonna measure every boat.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Like, come on.
Code enforcement has that boat now, and their
And they're
intent,
available 24 hours a day.
their intent is to go out on the water with this vessel and actually have a faster response, a non-emergency response to code violations. That's what we've been told. So how effective that's gonna be, we've asked, the utilization of it. They say, oh yeah, we're out with it, we're taking this, we're taking that. There's no data right now of how many code actions have been taken by the Marine Unit for code
Should we
enforcement.
ask them to come to one of the meetings to tell us how they're
Yeah.
doing it?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Andrew, is that a possibility?
It'd be good.
Sure, I can ask them, and I'll
I mean,
let you know.
they come,
Yeah.
regular code compliance comes to like the CBA
Sure.
meeting
No,
all the
I can ask
time, and they're now on the standard
Let's
agenda.
let's ask them. Tyler, you've had your hand up?
maybe I'm new, I don't know some of this stuff, but what is the punishment for these codes? Because again, you got these boats that are, we talked about this guy that just was trying to get a new building. I didn't see a problem with it, he's taking 37 feet back, he's going to 35, he's meeting all the standards of our waivers. But we do have all those boats there, they're all breaking the code. What's the punishment? Is there a lien on the house? Is there a lien on the boat? Can we do any of that stuff? Or is it a hard fine and you don't pay it?
It's a fine back to the property owner himself, which I think the applicant was surprised to hear that. It's so that's a problem.
Well, and that's some of the business too, when people are loading on these illegal, on these trespassing things.
Yeah.
It's not fining them. If the code enforcement catches them, it's fining the property owner that they are illegally trespassing on, which is wrong.
If we can get code enforcement to come speak to that, I'd like to have them speak to the volume of fines that are being issued and what the fine structure is perhaps.
Yeah, like is it $100 and you
It's
don't
just
have to pay
a cost
it?
of doing business or what?
Or do you lien their house and they can't sell their home until you
The problem is just like the railroad bridge. The fine is astronomical that the railroad and stuff over there, they just don't pay it. And when you go around and say, well, who collects it or where it is and stuff like that, like, because they have, every time that bridge is in violation of this and that, there's a fine. And they basically don't pay it.
So, but if we link a fine to a liening of a home, just like anybody who does maintenance on a home, if you don't pay a dock person the money that you owe them, they can lien your home as a mechanic lien. If we put a lien on a home, they're gonna pay that fine or they're not gonna sell their home.
The discussion that was had with the assistant city attorney on a parallel issue was vessels that are over length for their slips as well. And as Norbert mentioned, if they're not violating the 30% rule, there's no code action that can be enforced.
Right.
But what we're looking at, and this was kind of waivers off of the New River, generally speaking in the city, we can tie a boat length into the resolution approving the waiver, which becomes recorded as part of the deed, which transfers in perpetuity with that property, which then creates an enforceable code action against the property owner.
Right.
So that's why we're sort of sticklers for deed restrictions, because as you saw tonight, condo docks are great, but
well, they can be changed.
They can be changed by popular vote by the board. A deed restriction cannot.
Right.
Code enforcement can't enforce a condo rule. They can only enforce a city rule or a city regulation or a deed restriction. So we're trying very hard to get some of those things going. And these discussions have been going on for a while, and there's some frustration with that. But I think if we can stay the course, we can kind of come up with some solutions to help the city and actually ultimately help the homeowners. So what we saw tonight on Las Olas, the reason people are resistant to the pilings going out is because there's an abuse
there's
of other
abuse.
pilings
It's
that
not
have gone
because
out.
It's not because they don't meet the code, it's
So-
because people are putting a bigger boat there.
If we can find a way to actually control the abuse, that actually long-term helps everyone else because it makes people more receptive. Whether it's out 35 feet or 32 feet or 30 feet, I don't think is hugely the issue. It's the application of that dock. How big is that dock get? And everyone thinks about, well, it's a 16-foot wide dock, so I can't put anything bigger than X in there. Well, yeah, if we're thinking like a powerboater. But a monohull sailboat can certainly, there's a 65-foot McGregor sailboat that's 12 and a half feet wide.
Right.
You could a hot boat with quad, with quint motors is 14-foot beams.
Yeah.
It's not
So it's we don't really know. So I think having those actions are, and that's kind of ultimately our goal too, is to help. Tyler's got his job to do, and that's presenting things to us to listen to. The public speaks. We had opposition tonight to those waivers, and I think they were well thought out and well presented opposition, which I think is why we ruled the way we ruled on that one. It's nice when we don't operate in a vacuum. When we have public support and public input, it helps tremendously. And that's something we've been encouraging pretty actively with Andrew, is expanding the notifications to other residents, to other properties, to MISF, just everyone, so that we can get more of that input. Because I don't want to go to the city commission or Steve or whoever else is going to be the future chair and have to defend a position that we've taken when it's against what the public is saying. We only know what the public tells us. So we ask for public input because of that very reason. And having objections noted or support noted helps us make those decisions.
Let me ask you something, Andrew. At one point, we used to only submit to the commission the ones we either passed or was it the ones we refused? I think you changed that to the point where when the commission sees the ones that we passed and the ones that we think, that they also have the ones that were deferred? In other words, when they're looking at.
Not deferred, no.
Not deferred.
Well, it wasn't really deferred tonight, it was withdrawn.
Withdrawn, okay.
But the items that are denied approval, move forward with a recommendation to deny approval to the city commission.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, they used to only get, the commission used to be the ones that we only, I think the ones that we approved, they never had the ones, so they never realized that, there was, that's when they accused the board of
About a year
rubber
ago,
stamping because everything was approved. So now they give them the denials and the.
Correct, it used to be that we would ask the applicants if they wanted us to move forward with their denied application, and if they said no, it wouldn't move forward. If they said yes, move forward, then I will move forward with their
Yeah, one thing just to address on the enforcement, side, two ideas that have been floated on. One, when the boats are parking perpendicular, to the seawall, would be for enforcement, would be to not allow boats to go beyond whatever the dolphin pilings are, which would make sense. In other words, that the further, that's how, if it's a 50-foot piling out, you can put a boat up to there. Where it's obvious to anyone trying to enforce it, is like if the boat's sticking out beyond that, it's, it's doing something wrong. Whereas now.
Does that mean that our waivers now can go to 50 feet? Because if you can allow 45 foot in that canal we just talked about, can you put it out 45 feet?
Yeah.
Right,
Then
then you're
boat's
asking for
sticking out,
waivers.
yeah, it ought to, which was the logic even of the boat lift, that was brought up, the boat lifts was, and cause I harped on that forever, which is if you're allowed to put the boat behind your house, you should be able to pick the boat up. Right. And so it's like, okay, that was easy logic of just, you can pick it up if you put it out there. As far as the width and everything of it. The other idea for both the commercial pickups and potentially the loading of barges would be to designate an area that's city owned. It's hard because there's nothing, but especially for the commercial pickups, of having a public dock, and whereas now we can't do that on the floating docks. But if a part of the seawall downtown were designated as this is where if you have a license, you have insurance, and you're paying the city for a fee.
A permit fee.
To be able to use this spot, you can load and unload for an hour every day or whatever the time is. It's near a parking garage, near a bathroom, the best location for doing it, and share it. It's a shared public dock for people doing pickups, that are legally doing pickups. And you could easily then have a law if you're beyond a certain size boat or whatever at the floating docks, the cops are gonna get you, for doing it. Because they don't have to see money changing hands, you're just physically on there with a 50-foot boat that's only allowed to be a 25-foot boat in that dock, you get fined, for what it is.
It's gonna be snapped.
Right.
We tried that one time at the Las Olas Marina. We decided to designate that as a commercial pickup. And also to take would take some of the parking places and stuff away and make them for basically buses and taxi and everything else. So if there was a wedding party or something, these boats could pick up at the Las Olas Marina, and that way they would have their limos or their buses and everything else would be designated parking places along there where they could pick up. We went round and round with that, and we had problem with the condominium that owns the riparian rights on the water. They said no. They were the ones that said absolutely you can't do that and everything else, and that we were gonna do. It wasn't something that the boat could park overnight. It's just the boat would have pickup and everything else at only certain hours. In other words, it wasn't gonna be at midnight and stuff. They come at wedding parties. Perhaps they would drop them off, but at that point we were gonna have like wedding boats, fishing boats, diving boats, and everything else pull in. And designated parking places would be for limos and buses and stuff over there to drop the people off. We tried that in Las Olas, and your condo said, "Nope, no way."
Well, because they started using our docks. They were pulling up to our docks,
No,
or our boats.
on the north side over there where the boat show loads and unloads, all that, we used to put the barges in there and we'd load and unload and try and get out of here before any of the condo commanders called and seen our barge there and everything else. But we used to pull the truck over.
Not me. I actually know who it was that always called, yeah. Now we have 5 barges there for the marina.
Looking at tonight's meeting and, the energy in the room here, and Steve, I think you've said in the past that we've got a good thing going. We've got a lot of energy, a lot of input, a lot of knowledge here. I've asked Andrew to send something out to everyone, which is actually section 8-34, which is this document right here. And what this document does is it actually articulates what our duties are as the Marine Advisory Board. And I was actually surprised to read this. I've always, a lot of times I speak about, to study and recommend to the City Commission and, what our actual purpose is. But this actually is in the code as to what our duties specifically are. And they're a lot broader than I really thought. And there's a lot of information here that I think that we're chartered to do that we need to look at. Relations with the Coast Guard, regulations on boat docking, traffic conditions for bridges, activities of the Harbor Patrol, operation of privately owned marinas, hurricane procedures for the city, sanitation issues, advertising issues, commercial operations. I mean, it's very broad. These address both public and commercial sector as well as the residential sector of things. So as we move forward, and like I said, next meeting is my last meeting after 6 years. I encourage all of us to make sure that we continue to serve the entire community, that we make decisions, we look at our duties and responsibilities with the idea of the homeowner associations, condo associations, the needs of the city, the needs of the commercial industry, the needs of visiting yachts to Fort Lauderdale. It's pretty amazing, but he's going to email us out to everybody so we can, especially Tyler, new to the board. It's a heck of a job that you've taken on. Gentlemen, thank you again for your time tonight. Mr. Dunn, thank you very much. I do love that tie. So, I encourage you all to really, look at that and take it seriously, because this is serious work we're doing. And as you guys move forward with, post-April with the leadership that's going to be in place with our new members, we've got 3 new members coming in.
3, yeah.
3. So, they'll be with Tyler's 3. So once tonight, we have 2 more coming on board. I think Edward Bowles, and you also, correct?
Robert Washington.
Robert Washington. So, Robert's a great, I'm gonna call you out right now if you don't mind.
Don't mind.
So Robert started coming to these meetings as a member of the public, and he's in the construction business, he's in the marine contracting business, and he took it upon himself to take his Thursday nights, once a month, come here and listen to what we have to say, what we're doing. He's offered some information and viewpoints, and we encouraged him to try to get on the board, because I think he's got a great perspective. And I'm happy to see that you're successful in that.
And thanks for having me. And
so that's going to be awesome when you actually come on. When's he officially?
April.
April.
Yeah,
So I get to welcome you. That's going to be awesome. But we need that. We need a balance of realtors, commercial operators, marine operators, residents, all of that. So we have a perspective. So I know tonight was long, and I know we talked a lot. I know I talked a lot. I can feel it in my throat. But I think we're doing good stuff here, and I think if we all take it seriously and look at the minutes that were just circulated from tonight going out next week, hopefully.
Well, I don't know, after.
Hopefully. It's going to be a volume, but as soon as they get out, I encourage you guys to look at them so that April we can make a communication to the commission as part of our April meeting. That's my primary goal, is to communicate this specific issue to the city commission so they can then go out and talk to their constituents and get a consensus and move forward. And again, remember, we're limiting it to the New River. That's our goal. It's a specific geographical area for that.
I sent them to Andrew.
You got your work cut out for you.
She does.
To get you typed.
So are there any other old or new business topics for tonight's meeting? Going once, going twice? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.